quorum of members is participating, that each member's voice is clear, audible, and that an appropriate volume for all other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call and ask each ARB member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following the roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. Start as always with Ms. Michelle Aubrey.
This is Michelle Aubrey, and I'm at my residence in Alexandria, Virginia.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, I do not see John Burns in the list, and I also do not see him in the attendee list, which means he's not stuck down there for the moment. So I'm going to mark him as currently non-attending, absent. I am Christopher Daniel, Chairman of the Architecture Review Board, and I am presenting from my home in Reston, Virginia. Ms. Swan.
Yes, this is Samantha Huang. I'm joining the meeting from Reston, my home. I can hear everyone clear so far.
All right, and as though I summoned him, Mr. Kalinsky.
Hi, Steve Kalinsky. I am here in my home office in Fairfax.
Thank you very much, sir. Ms. Murray.
Elise Murray, and my residence in Vienna.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Notkins is marked as unexcused for her absence. Ms. Orr.
Hi, I can hear everyone clearly. I'm at my home in Alexandria.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Plumpy.
Hi, everyone is crystal clear. I'm in my residence in Fairfax Station, Virginia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Zellman.
I can hear everyone just fine, and I'm in my office in the city of Fairfax.
All right, and at this point, it doesn't appear as though any other members have joined us. So I'm going to mark that as our current agenda, or as our current roll call. At this point, I'm going to pass the virtual gavel over to my vice chairman, Mr. Zellman, so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. I move that each member's voice is adequately heard by each other member of this ARB.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, second by Mr. Kalinsky. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries.
All right. Next, as determined by the roll call, 5, 6, 7, I believe it's 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Sorry, just determined by the roll call, 8 members of this ARB are present and therefore satisfy the ARB quorum minimum. The ARB bylaws state that a minimum of 6 members are required to determine a quorum. It is so moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, second by Ms. Orr. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? And the motion carries.
All right. Third, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures. The fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for this ARB to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. And that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the ARB and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. Further move that the ARB may conduct this meeting electronically through WebEx, a county virtual meeting platform, and available for access to the ARB County website or through phone at 1-844-621-3956 with the access code 2339-748-611. It is so moved.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Wong. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? And the motion carries.
Next, it is required that all members, next it is required that all matters addressed on today's agenda are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of this board's lawful purpose, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, second, I think that was Miss Orr. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? And the motion carries.
All right. Next, the ARB needs to determine how long each member of the public will be able to speak during public comment periods. The public will be allowed to comment after consent agenda items and after each action item as is standard ARB practice. I move that each member of the public will have 3 minutes to speak.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second, Ms. Orr. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? And the gavel back to the chairman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Zellman. Mr. Burns, I see that you have joined us. Can you please test your audio and confirm that you can hear me? We need you to unmute. We still can't hear you, John.
Wrong here.
Oh, I heard you for a second there.
Well, I'm sorry, but my audio seems to be failing. I'm sorry you can't hear me.
Oh, nope, John, we can hear you now.
Okay, my apologies. If you can hear me now, my apologies to members of the board. All right, John, we still seem to be having audio issues with you, so we can't hear you right after you went to issue that apology. You cut out. I can hear you. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay, we'll take it from there. I'll update my list and show that Mr. Burns is in attendance. I'll be showing on the record that he's here, though having a few bit of audio procedures, we'll try to get them sorted out. All right. Onward with our agenda. Staff, Denise, are there any virtual WebEx bits of information you need to share?
Yes, thank you, Chris. This meeting is being recorded and the recording will be posted online within 10 days. Attendees may email me during the meeting use the chat box or the function in the WebEx platform for inquiries. Staff will monitor and respond accordingly. Attendees experiencing technical issues, please call WebEx technical assistance at 1-866-799-3293.
All right, thank you, Denise. All right, after all of that administrative work, we also kick off any ARB meeting with the reading of the statement of purpose and intent of historic overlay districts. Since I'm already doing a lot of talking, I take on that honor myself and will read them. Historic overlay districts are created for the purpose of promoting the general welfare, education, economic prosperity, and recreational pleasure of the public through the perpetuation of those general areas or individual structures and premises that have been officially designated by the Board of Supervisors as having historical, cultural, architectural, or archaeological significance. Regulations within such districts are intended to protect against destruction of or encroachment upon such areas, structures, and premises, to encourage uses which will lead to their continuous conservation and improvement in a manner appropriate to the preservation of the cultural, social, economic, political, architectural, or archaeological heritage of the county, to prevent the creation of environmental influences adverse to such purposes, and to assure that new structures and uses within such districts will be in keeping with the character to be preserved and enhanced. All right, I will remind applicants coming before us that applications that are here for the first time should try to limit their presentations to roughly about 8 minutes and resubmissions to roughly about 3 minutes. I'm also going to apologize up front that I've already coordinated with our vice chairman that there is the possibility that I may have to leave the meeting early due to a family situation. If so, I will let that know, and I will pass the gavel back over to Mr. Zellman to run the meeting since we have enough of a quorum to do so. With that in mind, moving onward with our agenda, we have the approval of our agenda. So I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda or modify it as suggested, if suggested.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Zellman, thank you. All right, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Kalinsky. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the agenda is approved as submitted in draft format. Introduction and recognition of guests. Denise, do we have any guests that we need to identify?
Not that I'm aware of, Chris.
All right, thank you. We've already noted in our initial motions that kick off the meeting that any item up for public comment will have 3 minutes if a member of the public wishes to comment on it. I'll highlight that we don't have any items in the consent calendar, but we do have one item in action. After the presentation for that item, if any member of the public does wish to comment on that item, they will need to raise their hand or indicate to staff via the comment features in WebEx to let them know, and we will afford the time to provide your statement. All right, with that in mind, we have no items on the consent calendar, so moving onward to our items for action. This next one is ARB 22 HOL 01 Holland Hills Historic Overlay District. The Holland Hills Historic Overlay District was approved by the Board of Supervisors on March 8th, 2022. The Holland Hills HOD consists of 492 parcels located in tax grids 93-1, 93-3, 93-4, and 102-1. This proposal is to adopt design guidelines for Holland Hills Historic Overlay District, previously presented to the ARB at its February 22nd meeting, as well as other subsequent meetings. Laura Arsenault with the Department of Planning and Development staff represents the application. Laura, good to see you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Oh, Mr. Burns.
Yes, if I may be recognized for a second.
Yes, you may be recognized, Mr. Burns.
Okay. About less than an hour ago, we all received an email from the county attorney's office.
John, we can't hear you again.
First time we've done this, and so I am the guinea pig in this. I have.
Hey, John, you're breaking in and out, so we can't hear you very well.
So I will read it. I, John Burns, under Virginia Code Section 2.2-3112.
Hey, Denise, we may need to try to alert John that we cannot.
Yeah.
Involving the Holland Hills
He can
HOD.
clearly not hear us.
Mr. Burns, we cannot hear you.
I believe, if so, for everyone wondering, I believe John was going to read a statement regarding his association with Holland Hills as a resident living there that the county attorney had advised him on. We're going to message him real quick.
Mr. Daniel, could you ask Mr. Burns to start from the beginning? Because we really couldn't hear anything that he was saying. I think he has new headphones on. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, Denise, but I cannot hear John.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. John, can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, well, we did not hear but the beginning of your statement in which you said you were going to be a guinea pig.
Oh, okay, you heard the guinea pig part.
Yes.
Okay, then I will start after that part. Okay. This is the suggested oral disclosure statement as written by the county attorney. I, John Burns, under Virginia Code Section 2.2-3112B1 and 2.2-3115H, declare my personal interest in transactions brought before the Architectural Review Board involving the Holland Hills HOD and specifically state the following. 1. Consideration of the Holland Hills design guidelines involves the Holland Hills Historic Overlay District. 2. The nature of my personal interest is that I own and reside in a home that is valued over, get this, $5,000 and is located in the Holland Hills HOD. 3, I am a member of a group of 3 or more persons who are members of which are affected by the transaction, i.e. that's the 400 plus people who live here. And 4, I am able to participate in the transaction fairly, objectively, and in the public interest. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, John. We heard you loud and clear and appreciate you being the guinea pig to read out that disclosure statement. All right, with that in mind, again, we are on action item ARB 22HOL01, and the presentation is going to be presented to us by Ms. Laura Arsenault. Laura, are you there still?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Daniel. I am happy to report, as Mr. Daniel stated earlier, the Holland Hills HOD was approved by the board on, hold on, let me get all this gray stuff off your screen. There you go. Was approved by the board on Tuesday, March 8th. And so tonight I've brought back to you the design guidelines that were dated February 2022. We discussed them at the workshop, at the ARB workshop last month in February, and I just have a couple updates for you. So a very, very short PowerPoint. Get it to work. Okay. So since I've seen you last, the Planning Commission recommended approval of the Holland Hills Historic Overlay District. And then, as I just mentioned, the board approved it on March 8th. The next step tonight is the ARB review and motion if they would like to approve of the design guidelines. But really tonight is for the discussion of the design guidelines, and we are here for action. I did want to bring this up. This is a little bit of a tangent to the design guidelines, but I did want to bring up the grandfathering clause that was approved by the Board of Supervisors, and the purpose of this, and I wanted to share the language specifically because I know it's of interest to the community as well, was to make sure that any building permits that were basically in queue for review and it had been accepted before March 8th received the grandfathering clause, would abide by this grandfathering clause that was stated. So it really states that any building permit, site plan, any site related plan submitted and accepted for review before March 8th would not be subject to ARB review pursuant of the provisions of Section 3101, provided such plans or plats are approved within 12 months. The plan or plat remains valid. Building permits for the structures shown on the plan are issued within 6 months of approval, and the structures and uses are constructed in accordance with such building permits. We have had a number of queries on this instance, and some have met the grandfathering clause and some have not. But if this comes up, please let me know, and I'm happy to talk through it further. And let me know if there's any questions on this issue. Oops. Once again, back to the draft design guide. Sorry, a little departure there. It is included for reference in the staff report. You did receive an updated version dated February 22, as I said, 2022, as I said. You have the final approval authority over the design guidelines. It does not need to go back to the Board of Supervisors. Sarah Vonish and Laura Hughes from EHT Traceries, the consultant who helped us put together the design guidelines, are also on the call if there's any questions specifically for them. So items for discussion that have come to our attention since the last ARB meeting, the workshop for the design guidelines, a discussion about disclosure language, about any sort of potential interest or conflict, between the Community Design Review Committee, their design guidelines, and also the Historic Overlay District County Design Guidelines. There's also a question about reference to the Design Review Committee in the design guidelines, and staff has recommended to strike any reference to the Design Review Committee in the design guidelines for clarity and separation for the community purposes. This is a cleanup item from Ms. Aubrey. Thank you for mentioning this. Remove mention of potential or proposed HOD throughout the document. Make sure addresses and license plates on cars are not visible and blurred out in photos for privacy purposes. Updating, this is administrative, updating the ARB and History Commission members page. Updating a reference to the contributing and non-contributing numbers. It was outdated from the last iteration. There was a reference to carports, which staff has already corrected. And then there were 2 questions about the ADA standards and archaeology contact info, and those have been corrected as well. Those are the only edits and comments I received on the design guidelines from last time, but I know there are some items that the ARB and or the community would like to discuss. That is the end of my presentation for right now.
All right, thank you so much, Laura. Well, now that the presentation has occurred, following our bylaws, next we will allow members of the public other than the applicant, either in favor or opposed to the granting the application, may present statements of concern related to the application. So Denise, as well as I think Grace might be helping you. If y'all could let me know if there are any members of the public that have raised their hand or indicated in the chat feature that they wish to provide a comment, that would be immensely helpful so that we may allow those folks a chance to talk.
Sure, and I just want to mention that if you're calling in, the way to raise your hand or indicate that you want to speak on this item is press star three, and we'll be able to unmute you. So if you have any...
All right. And Denise, are we going to be able to have a clock so we can show folks the amount of time they have for their comment?
That's a good point, Chris. Of course, hadn't thought about that, but I can time it on my watch and let people know for if they have 3 minutes. And I do see one person with their hand up.
So I see Mr. or Mrs. Patrick Kelly. So,
Mr. Kelly, you are unmuted and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Oh, wonderful. Good evening, and it's my pleasure to be here tonight. I am the president of the Civic Association of Holland Hills, and this has been a tremendously long process, but also very enlightening and very necessary. We appreciate the work that Laura Arsenault and her staff have done, tremendous work over the last 4 years, as well as our county supervisor, Dan Stork, who supported this effort for the Historic Overlay District. And we're delighted to be working with the Architectural Review Board and to have your support for ensuring the harmony and conformity of our mid-century modern architecture in our community. So we look forward to a terrific partnership moving forward. And thank you in advance for your efforts here with the approval of the design guidelines this evening, or in short measure, and for future work with our homeowners as they pursue the 21st century design changes to match and meet and enhance the Goodman style that we appreciate here. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Kelly. Denise, I think I see at least one other hand up in the attendee list. I believe Ms. Barbara Ward also has her hand up.
Yes, Ms. Ward, you have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Barbara Ward. I am also a resident of of Holland Hills. I am also the Design Review Committee Chair. We are working with our community to make sure that people remember that although we are now an historic overlay district, the covenant, which has been in existence since the beginning of our community in 1949, which requires that any additions to or any new builds in the neighborhood must be in harmony and conformity with existing structures, still exist, and we still have the duty to interpret and enforce that. I am very familiar, obviously, with the DRC guidelines. I've also reviewed the ARB proposed guidelines. I don't see them to be in conflict with each other or in any way incompatible. Just to let you know, although I'm sure John Burns knows this as well, our procedures take place prior to the time that the applicant homeowner goes to the building department. So once the people go to the building department with plans that have been approved by the DRC, we very rarely see them again, except in the case that the building department would make them make some major change. So your procedures are from the building department thereafter. I think that that will work out smoothly for us all. Hopefully you will get packages from homeowners that are in good condition that you will find acceptable. I think that this time for the next few months is going to be one of some learning on both sides. And I look forward to watching your group put together and apply your design guidelines. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Ward. All right, Denise, I do not see any other hands in the attendee list. Did you get any in the chat or through, I don't know if we were using the FAQ feature in this one or not.
We are not, but I do not, besides for Ms. Ward, who still has her hand up, I do not see any other hands raised or, yeah.
All right, well then at that time, I'm not seeing any other indications of public comment. So with that in mind, I think we may move on to the next item in our considering applications, which are any statements or arguments from an official commission or department of the county, state agency, local historical or preservation and neighborhood association as presented regarding the application. I don't know beyond what you provided to us in the materials online. If we had any others, did we, Laura?
No, but I'd like to ask if we could call in some of the phone numbers, because I know there were some community members calling in, Denise, if that's appropriate, because I just want to make sure they have an opportunity if
So I announced at the beginning of the public comment that if they do have a comment, they should press *3. And I have not seen anybody press *3.
Okay, thanks, Denise. I just wanted to make sure we gave that opportunity.
Sure. So the opportunity is open now. If anybody calling in would like to make a comment, please press *3.
Thank you, Laura and Denise, for clarifying that one more time, just in case. I know some of this technology stuff can be cumbersome, as you saw earlier. Poor Mr. Burns had the finagle of a set of headphones. Looks like it's out of the 90s. All right. I'm not seeing any other indications of raised hands at this point. Laura, I'd ask if to my question before, if you've gotten any other. I do see one hand up. So from an individual titled Priest.
Here we
You
go.
are unmuted.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. This is Mark and Larissa Priest, also residents of Holland Hills. We are just phoning in to voice our support for the HOD. It sounds like the path of greatest effect for least disruption. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much to both of you. And thank you very much for identifying yourselves for the record. All right. I'm checking one more time. And other than that additional hand, I don't see any other ones. So I think we're good at that with the public comment. Again, Laura, were there any other indications from, I know you said obviously it was carried through with the Board of Supervisors, and I guess Denise, did the History Commission provide any input on the guidelines? I know they provided support for the actual HOD listing. I'm just trying to make sure I'm meticulous in my.
We received no further communication from the History Commission.
All right. Well, with that in mind, we will go through into discussion. So I will go around as normal for all the members. We can ask questions of Laura. So we start, as always, Ms. Albright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to thank Laura and all of the staff at the county for all their efforts over a long period of time to get this to the stage now where we can approve it. And Laura did mention, I had looked at the last iteration and I just submitted some editorial comments, so that was all. I'm very supportive of the designation, and I have no comments or questions or anything at this point. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Michelle. All right, Mr. Burns.
Mr. Chairman, I have no additional comments other than those I've made in previous meetings. Concerning the design guidelines, I support their adoption. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Ms. Wan?
Mr. Chairman, I have no further comment. I also supportive on this proposed HOA.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Mr. Kalinsky?
Excuse me, I too have no editorial comments and support this.
All right, Ms. Murray?
Sorry, I was muted. I would like to say ditto. I will not take up your time.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Murray. Ms. Orr?
Laura, you've done an amazing job. I support this.
All right, Mr. Plumpy?
Laura, you've done an excellent job and an amazing job, and I support it very much, and I love the neighborhood. Can't wait to see it keep its same state and see how it matures over the future. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Zellman?
I agree with everybody else. Thanks, Denise. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, everybody else at the county. Great job.
All right, I cannot agree more with my fellow members. Thank you very much, Laura, Denise, and several of our other staff who have left us and gone on to other positions who have helped carry this across the goal line. All their efforts were very well appreciated. And I agree with Ms. Ward. I think it will be a bit of a learning period, but I think it's one that we've indicated several times during these meetings and the workshops that the ARB is here to help people work through their application process and try to be as assistive as possible to help people achieve success with what they're proposing and make sure it's in conformance with the zoning ordinance and our guidelines. And I think the advice is well taken on the fact that there are obviously two parallel or perhaps review periods that occur, one at the neighborhood level and one at the county level, and why the two of them are independent of one another. They obviously serve very unique purposes and a good thing to keep in mind and to remind all members of. All right, with that in mind, I have no other comments, and so I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Burns?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the ARB approve action item ARB 22-HOL-01, Holland Hills Historic Overlay District Design Guidelines, to adopt design guidelines for the newly created Holland Hills Historic Overlay District as submitted and presented at the March 10, 2022 ARB meeting. Upon review of the materials, the proposal is found to meet the requirements zoning ordinance 3101 historic overlay districts.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I believe that was seconded by Ms. Orr.
Yay!
Okay. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. All right, thank you very much. Really appreciate you presenting this, Laura, and also great appreciation to our team of folks that have all assisted developing these guidelines, including the folks at Traceries, obviously. We should give them all thanks as well.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah Vonish and Laura Hughes. Appreciate it.
All right, that takes us out of our items for action and moves us into our items for workshop. Our first item on the agenda for workshop is ARB 22 CRM 01WS, difficult run pump station, grit mitigation and pump station upgrades, located at 9950 Colville Run and Great Falls in the Colvin Run Mill Historic Overlay District. This project is proposing modifications to a pre-existing precast diversion gate structure associated with the difficult run pump station. Jason Newbold and Zhaolun Gao from Hazen Sawyer represent the application. And I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Please feel free to correct it for the record.
Oh yes, this is James Newbold or Jim Newbold, and with Hazen and Sawyer. And we also have Ag Fallon with us from Fairfax County, Denise. I'm not sure if she's been unmuted. So she's the project manager.
Yeah, she has been made a panelist.
Yep,
Okay.
I'm here.
Here? Okay, great. So she's here. And we have Xiao as well from Hazen and Sawyer. So if it's okay with you, Denise, we'll pull up our presentation and start sharing our screen, and we'll move forward. Does that sound good?
Yes, I'm having difficulty making you a presenter. Can you give me just one moment?
Of course.
Thank you.
And I assume everyone can hear us well.
Yes, we can hear you, and hopefully we'll be able to see the presentations shortly.
Excellent.
While Jim is working on the presentation, allow me to get started. My name is Ag Fallon. I'm with the Fairfax County Wastewater Design and Construction Division. The Difficult Run Pump Station is located in the Colvin Run Historic Overlay District. And today we'll be talking about some modifications that we're doing to an existing diversion structure. This is a diversion structure that's located approximately 500 feet from the pump station itself. And the pump station provides service to the northern part of Fairfax County. So it's one of our bigger, more important structures. This diversion structure allows us to take flow from the collection system and route it into the pump station where it can be pumped for treatment to the Nomonco plant. I will turn it over to Jim Newbold, who will give you some more details, and then are happy to answer any questions that you will have. Jim?
All right, great. Thank you, Ag. So what we'll do today in this presentation is essentially give an overview of the documentation we have provided as part of the workshop package, and then just dive a little deeper in some of the aspects of the project. So in summary, this existing structure, we're calling the diversion structure, as Ag described, is an existing structure that's at grade, where we will be adding additional precast concrete sections to bring the structure above the 100-year floodplain. On top of the structure, there'll be an actuator for a gate that is within the structure. There'll be some electrical panels on top and handrail around, in addition to access stairs to get to the top of the structure and a security fence around those stairs. So what we've dimensioned here is the top of the structure being roughly 10 feet above grade, and the dimension of the structure itself at the top is about 11.5 feet by a little over 9 feet wide. And this picture here is just an example to kind of help give a visual of what the structure will end up looking similar to. This is a cast in place structure with a handrail on top, so kind of help with the visualization as we're progressing through. So these next few slides will demonstrate the proximity of our project site to the Colvin Run Mill. So we're about a half a mile from the Colvin Run Mill. We are, if you can see here, the Colvin Run Mill Road, and then the Difficult Run Trail runs past the Difficult Run Pump Station, and in which there's an access path to the maintenance path to the diversion structure, and the diversion structure being about 400 feet from the Difficult Run Trail. And we are about 200 feet off of Route 7. So this is the image that was shown on the initial slide, showing the Colvin Run Mill Historic Overlay District boundary line and the location of the diversion structures to give a sense of the proximity of the structure to kind of the edge of that Colvin Run Mill HOD boundary line. So these next 5-6 slides are going to show some photos we took recently and some photos from the past to demonstrate the visual, limited visual impact of the structure from the trail. So this first picture, denoted as picture 1 here in the key map, is looking down the Difficult Run Trail with the pump station on the left, and shows the trail, and then the access path is actually to the right here. The photo on the left was taken about 2 weeks ago, so there's construction that had been taking place recently. So this is showing kind of that that type of site, construction in winter, and then on the right is a picture from the fall. So this photo number 2 is looking down that maintenance access road, the gravel road that goes to the structure. And this is again taken a couple weeks ago. Winter construction was done recently down this area for a project on that Potomac interceptor, in which they had done work with the DC water trunk sewer line. This third photo is actually still on the difficult run trail, but now we're looking the other direction where the access path down to the structures on the left and the pump stations on the right. You can see the fence line around the pump station's parking area. And then the photo right here on the right is just showing a fall foliage, kind of give a sense of the difference between the winter and the fall, kind of give a sense of the screening that occurs. This photo is at a bridge that goes over a culvert on the difficult run trail, looking in the direction of the project site. So you can see down here, and you can imagine, during the months where there's growth, it would be screened pretty well from passerbys. And this is actually down right in front of the diversion structure, a little ways in front of the diversion structure, looking back up the path to the difficult run pump station. And again, this was taken a couple weeks ago. So you can see there's a decent amount of clearing that was done for that work. And so this is actually the top of that existing structure as it is now, where this will be brought up 18 inches above that floodplain. So that's going to make it about 10 feet above grade. It has to be above the floodplain for, to be in compliance with having the structure in the floodplain for this utility structure being in the floodplain. So we had to bring it up to satisfy those requirements. And so this gives you an idea of what the top of it would look like, but it would be raised up to accommodate that. And so again, this was taken, this one on the left, picture on the left is taken in the winter during periods of construction. The right is during the fall. So again, it gives you that sense of the natural growth that occurs.
Right, and I just wanted to add and to clarify, the construction that's currently going on is related to the widening of Route 7 and the associated utility relocation and utility upgrades that were done in the area. So that has nothing to do with the project that we're proposing. This is just a separate, different project that's in the same area.
Exactly.
So I just wanted to clarify that.
Oh, I forgot I can do a laser pointer. Thank you, Ag. That's very helpful. And these are some additional photos of the area. So this is the old structure that used to be in place. This is no longer present, but it gives you again an idea of the type of growth that occurs in that area. And this is the photo on the right is looking up towards the pump station, and we're standing behind this Potomac interceptor, that large sewer trunk line, with a manhole shown here as well. That actually no longer exists as part of that utility work. So part of the package we had pulled together for the ARB was going through all the different the historic overlay district design guidelines. So we created essentially a checklist. We wanted to go through everything to make sure we had met all the different standards of standards 1 through 9. And so, we believe based on the proximity of this structure relative to the Colvin Run Mill and the Colvin Run Mill Road and the trail, that we satisfy those design guidelines for this project. All right, thank you. So that is the end of our presentation, and I will see if I can.
All right.
Sharing.
Thank you so much. Well, what we'll do, just like before, is I'll go around to the various ARB members and have them ask any questions I might have. Obviously, because this is a workshop session, it's a little less formal than our regular applications, but given that we're still operating remotely, it's easier to do it this way. So Miss Aubrey, do you have any comments or questions?
Well, since I am concerned about things that are underground, and this is a project that seems to be raising something up in the air, I really don't have any concerns about archaeology. So, no, you can move on to the next person.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple questions. Your photograph number 6, I believe, showed the prior conditions.
Yes, sir.
Actually, it's the next one.
Oh, I see. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. There it was, as it were. Right? Is
Mhm.
that correct? Okay.
Yeah,
You
correct.
said that you need to raise it to clear a 100-year floodplain, but you also said you needed to raise it 10 feet. So are you saying a 100-year flood will be 10 feet above the top of the existing structure?
It would be about 8.5 feet.
8.5
So we're
feet.
we're bringing it 18 inches above that floodplain, 100-year floodplain.
Yeah.
That is like
And
a massive amount of water.
Hmm.
it is. And actually, in early September of last year, I think it was September 2nd or 1st, when we had a lot of storms coming through, Difficult Run Creek, I'm sorry, Difficult Run River was overflowing, and that whole area was completely covered with water. The water reached just under the Route 7 bridge. So yes, water really does get that high up there. We have some pictures. We did not include them here, but if you're interested, I can forward them.
No, I don't question it. I'm just kind of incredulous that that existing structure has been there for however many years, and it now suddenly needs to be raised 8.5 feet above its current elevation is quite an astonishing change. That was pretty much the extent of my questions. And one other thing was related to that photograph you had shown is you mentioned that that manhole that was visible has been removed. Has it been relocated or removed entirely? Or is there another manhole that also goes up 10 feet in the air?
Oh, okay. So yeah, there won't. So this manhole is removed, and there won't be a manhole that's 10 feet in the air. So there's actually another vault that has been installed, but that's going to be right above grade. That doesn't need to be raised above the floodplain. And so the primary reason for the change in elevation in the structure is that actuators on top is going to be operating the gate. That's installed. So there's been there's going to be some mechanical upgrades, electrical upgrades to it, so that's why it needs to be brought up above so it can function as intended.
Okay, so in a flood situation, do you divert some of those floodwaters to the pump station?
No,
No.
No,
no,
this is
we
designed to keep the
continue to
floodwaters out of the
divert.
pump station.
We continue to divert sewage into the pump station using the structure as a control structure. And we are keeping the floodwaters from mixing with the sewage.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. Ms. Swan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have no concern with this project.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Kalinsky.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. My questions kind of follow along the lines of Mr. Burns' questions, just trying to better understand everything here. He's kind of revealed more to me what this is, which gets me to thinking, the appearance of it. What's it going to look like? Is it just going to be precast concrete panels? Is there going to be any attempt to either decorate or celebrate it in any way, or to play it down? What's the thinking? What's the thinking about how it's going to be treated? It's going to be this, solid, massive sort of piece sitting in the landscape. So as a review board member, architectural review board member, what I would like to know, or what I'd like to see, is how that's going to be handled.
So we are planning on keeping it the most simple, smallest structure. So the size of it, and Jim, you have it in the beginning. I don't want to
there's numbers, it's 11 by 9 feet. That is the smallest structure that we could do functionally. We plan to keep it in that kind of a grayish background. It's close to the Route 7 and the bridge over Difficult Run, which has the same type of construction of concrete. And then we have the handrails, which we are required to have, obviously, for safety. So that is our intent right now. If there's any input or suggestions, we will definitely incorporate those into our design.
Okay. Well, I understand it's very utilitarian in nature, but we have over the years seen some interesting ways to handle these utilitarian structures, and I understand there are precast concrete risers being placed on. Were they not precast and they were cast in place, I would suggest that you do something with the treatment with the face of the exposed concrete. Whether it had vertical striping or there's all sorts of different types of form boards, and there's different ways to treat the inside of forms. But obviously that's not the case here. Then the question is there something that could be added to this to say screen or shield the face or to celebrate it or to make it more interesting, whether it's metal perforated screen or I'm spitballing some ideas here as an architect. Just has any thought been given to that? Is there anything in the budget there, or are we just going to be faced with a concrete monolith?
We can certainly look into doing some treatments on the concrete, like you mentioned, some forms that would give it a striped appearance or maybe kind of like a brick block appearance. I don't know what's available. We can certainly look into that. I would prefer to keep it screened as much as we can with the trees that are around, with the other plant life that's around. It is tucked in, very much down away from the trail and the pump station, the areas that get the most pedestrian traffic. So we really don't want to attract public attention to that structure. We want to keep everyone kind of away and safe from there. We are adding the fencing to make sure that nobody goes up there. So I would not want to, put a mural on it or something and attract attention. Definitely want to just screen it.
How close to the structure could you plant?
So
do you have to keep a maintenance road around it or loop around it, or what's the criteria for?
So we would want to keep enough in there to be able to drive a truck down. Everything else can be planted. So right now the area looks very open because of all the construction that was done. Prior to that, that whole area was completely overgrown. But yeah, we can definitely plant closer to the structure. Just leave enough for, like I said, a truck access.
Okay. I mean, it could be something of great interest, if handled properly, and wouldn't necessarily have to be, hidden in the woods. But I mean, I'm just wondering what the tact was, which approach to how you were going to treat this. I mean, if it's hidden in the woods and you can accomplish that's fine too. So, if you before coming back or when you come back, if you've given it some thought as to how that's either going to be screened or how it's going to be viewed, unscreened and viewed, then that'd be great to know. That would help us make our decision. So thank you.
Okay. So we'll look into plantings, and we will look into an architectural treatment of the concrete with the goal of screening the structure as much as possible.
Okay.
Understood.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kolinsky. And Ms. Murray.
I agree with Mr. Kolinsky's comments, but I kind of wonder if something like this in an isolated location like that, it's probably best not to draw attention to it by celebrating it architecturally or be vandalized, perhaps become a background for graffiti. It's functional, it's what it is, and I think that I'm okay with it looking more or less the way they have it planned.
All right, thank you, Elise. Miss Orr.
Well, I encourage a look at it from realizing that it will be there a very long time and that you can always choose to do something industrial but beautiful versus just solving the problem. Anyway, just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Plumpy. Joe, are you there?
Yes, I just woke up. Just kidding. No, I'm here. I apologize. I had trouble with my video and mic. But in any event, thanks for the presentation. A couple observations in the existing photographs that you took. I see that you have silt fencing. Did you put that up for grading purposes or just to demarcate limits of disturbance? Because it is a super silt fence that you've done. Did you have to grade the road in there for this to service the existing one, or how much stuff did you do? And what was it before? Was it fully wooded and you never went back there?
So before it was fully wooded, as you can see on the
Okay.
photo to the right, like I said, the project that's currently being done is part of the Route 7 widening, as well as the associated utility work. So that is not our project. That is not, it had nothing to do with the difficult run pump station or, this application specifically. So I can't really speak on the fence and the area that was provided. This is a different project
Okay.
by a different entity.
Let me ask you something then. So with that widening of Route 7 and so forth and utility work and your work, what's the end result for the landscape? I'm the landscape architect. I mean, are you going to reforest the area so it gets hidden again by the woods and no one really cares if it's there? Or do you need to have a service access road all the time now since you've upgraded the structure?
So we've always had access to that particular structure. You can see,
Yep.
I wouldn't call it a road, but there was an access that was free of trees. The rest of the area was either trees or bushes.
Okay. Do you think?
And we plan to return to that state.
Okay. So when it's all said and done, it'll be just like it was with the rutted roadway. Like the tire marks that will go to the structure, and that's it. Everything else will be fully covering this with new vegetation and so forth.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I mean, Mr. Klinsky's, it's weird. He had to go before me, which I was kind of upset, but we are alphabetical order here. So just kidding. But the bottom line is he and Ms. Hoare said the same thing: is do you want to celebrate it or play it down? And there's a project in San Francisco on the Bay. It's called Gasworks, which is an old refinery and so forth that they painted and made into art in the landscape. As a landscape architect, I would welcome art in the landscape here because it's unique and different. And like in the city of Alexandria, they've wrapped the transformers along all the intersections and so forth, and traffic control boxes with art in the city of Alexandria. So another opportunity, but it sounds like you want to play it down, which kind of makes sense now if you're going to have all the vegetation grow back to its demeanor. I think it'd be interesting is really when you come back is to see what the vegetation that you're going to plant there or what the other applicant that is doing the disturbance in this area is going to plant there to see if it will give you what you envision as a kind of a wooded thicket eventually over, let's say, 5 to 10 years until it disappears. My assumption is, how often do you have to go here to service it? Do you ever have to service it if it's just there only in over 100-year floodplain or like 150-year storm? The water goes straight into it, I take it, because you said it was 2 feet below the top, the 100-year.
Yeah. So, we anticipate someone going out there once a month to exercise the gate at most.
Gotcha. Just okay. So that's why it's that way. And do you need steps versus a ladder with a catwalk around it? Just asking, because the steps seem to really come out as opposed to vertical. step,
They
vertical ladder.
do. In the event of maintenance, when somebody has to go up there and get tools and things like that,
Yeah, I got
our
it.
staff
Easier.
has a very strong preference for steps over ladders,
Okay,
as you
it
can
makes
imagine.
sense. It makes sense, and really, I agree with the other people who spoke. Because if you could, have a little more fun with the form liner, it is maybe a slightly more cost, but not something that break the bank and give you some shadow lines that would help make it disappear a little bit more and kind of go to the landscape, eventually. But again, coming back, it'd be interesting to show the proposed landscaping. And did you take pictures from Route 7 or wherever you think you'd see this? The closest, I think Route 7 was the closest view shed.
So from Route 7, we, just given the amount of construction is going on right now in that area, so I
Yeah.
wasn't able to go get a picture from Route 7, but
Okay.
you can kind of get a sense of proximity with this
Yeah.
photo.
It'd be interesting when you come back, see if you could sneak in there when the construction crews are away for the day and see what you have, because I've got a feeling you're going to see it from Route 7 for a while until the vegetation grows around it. That's just my gut reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll see what we can do.
Okay, that's all I have right now. Thank you so much. It's good. You got to do what you got to do, and either that or we have a drought, which we don't want a drought, so we want rain. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you, sir. Mr. Zellman.
I don't have anything to add to what's been said. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Zellman. I would agree with some of my fellow members' comments about what can we do to obviously this isn't a structure like in Reston where we have many utilitarian structures like underways and bridges and stuff that are decorated and have ways to draw attention to them. In this instance, I agree it's just not something you really want to be drawing people out to. So any type of coloring or patterning that's going to make it less visible, and because I think one of the pictures you showed exhibited it from the trail, correct? The difficult run trail.
Yes.
Yep.
And so if you could go back to that, I want.
Oh, can you see it?
Okay, there you go. Yes. And
Yep.
so I think that would be my one question is, whatever we're doing there to make sure it's not, that's part of the reason why folks go to the trails in Fairfax County is to kind of get away from all the madness that is Fairfax County. So whatever flexibility we have to make it as unobtrusive and as unnoticeable as possible. So when one is enjoying their difficult run, they could potentially not really pay it much mind. That would be my only other observation. And to John, to your comment about you think that might not, you think that seems too high for a 100-year flood. Having dealt with that when my former time working for the Army and some of the 100-year flood marks we've been hitting in the county, it's scary how high it can actually get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, could I add a few more things?
Yeah, sure, absolutely, John.
Okay. Yes, I agree with you. A flood is not twice as much water; it's 10 to 50 times as much water. It's not just a little bit more; it's a huge amount more. So, in terms of either making it attractive or disguising it or something else, two observations. One is the view from the pump station trail to it. It's an invitation. It's dead in alignment with it, and and you can see it, and it has a stair. So people say, "Oh, maybe it's an observation deck over the stream. I'll go down there." If you could somehow configure the access so that it's S-shaped, so you don't obviously see it from the trail, I think that would help disguise it. Obviously you can still keep your access road open. It just wouldn't be a straight line shot. That I think might help. And yeah, I agree. It would be nice to make it more attractive, but I think my insurance agent would call that an attractive nuisance. That is, it would attract attention to itself and attract people. And you suggested that the fence will stop people from accessing it. I think it will deter people from accessing it, unless you got some special kind of fence, rather than stop them. Thank you. I do appreciate you bringing it to our consideration.
Thank you.
If I could just have a moment to address, the access is along an existing easement that we have. So changing the arrangement, changing the access road, as we're calling it, um, would require us to get additional easements, and that's not very likely. We can, however, we'll look into maybe rotating the stairs to a different side so they're not visible. So that's something we can look into and see if that's possible to do. If
The
that
area
will
that you have
make it
clear
easier.
looks like you have enough space that you could create a long, slow S-curve that might cut off direct visual access to it. It's way wider than you need for a truck. It's probably wide enough for heavy construction equipment.
And that's exactly what went down there. Very heavy construction equipment. That's why it was widened so much during the construction. Jim, can you throw out a photo looking down the trail before the construction happened?
I want to say, so I can look, there's a photo looking up back towards the pump, back kind of towards the pump. So the pump
Yeah.
station, you can see kind of from this photo, you can see it because of all the clearing. And they had acquired some temporary construction easements to create this. So those are, will no longer be valid after construction. But this kind of gives you a sense of what it looks like with the growth. So it's hard to, it is screened relatively well from the trail.
In addition to
we'll look into it.
architectural surface treatments, you might just simply consider making it a dark color so it doesn't stand out like a beacon, even if you can. So if you have to see it from the pump station, don't make it so obvious by making it, bright white concrete.
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea.
All right. Are there any other ARB members that have any other comments they want to provide?
Yeah. This is Joe Clumpy.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I was going to say, picking up what Mr. Burns was saying there, could you, I know right now the stairs kind of come out 90 degrees from the structure. Could you ever have it attached to the structure so that it has two sides? So you go up a series of steps, a landing, and then you make a 90-degree turn and then go up a series of steps to the top versus having that step stick out. So it's more compact.
We'll look into that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I think it looks like there are no other comments. I think you've gotten a lot of feedback from us, and it sounds like the big key thing I think will be coming back to us and next time for when you do come in for submission and approval with some answers to some of the questions you got here. We found that's the most successful way if you're able to kind of bring up what we brought up with you last time and how you've been able to or unable to address those given any circumstances. And I guess we'll look forward to seeing you in the future for an application or review.
Very good.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
All
your
right. Thank you,
time.
everybody. Thank you for the time.
Absolutely. Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.
All right. We move on to our next workshop session. This is ARB 22 PCH01WS, a monument sign located at Pohick Church at 9301 Richmond Highway in Lorton. This project proposes a new monument sign for the historic Pohick Church. Marissa Avon with Fast Signs of Springfield is representing the application. Marissa, I see you there with your Fast Signs logo right in the background. Cannot miss you.
I don't want anyone to forget or get confused who I am. I appreciate your guys' time very much this evening. I've been in business for 3 years here in the Springfield Fast Signs, and this is my first presentation to you guys, the ARB at Fairfax. I've done a couple in Vienna and Old Town Alexandria, but it's nice to meet all these friendly faces. So with that, thank you for your patience as I kind of tell our story. My customer really wanted to increase visibility to Pohick Episcopal Church, and I said, what? Where? What is this? It's such a hidden treasure. So we were excited to do a site survey, take a look at, the ambiance, the feeling, the visibility, and see how can we increase, visitor traffic to experience all of the neat things here. So, and this is just, of course, a picture of the church itself, which is so interesting. If you guys haven't had a tour lately, it's fun. And we began our research. So we started with the Pohick Historical District rules and requirements, of course. And just really, we're sensitive to all the requirements and the amazing font that's still there. It does talk in really great detail. So we took into account, not only the size and location in respect to the area, but in particular, the color schemes. I think a first proposal from our customer was bright red, and we said, no, not appropriate. So we took that into consideration, and we definitely weren't going to do the digital message board that was requested, and said it has to be subtle and it will be an upward lit monument sign. So with that, after we toured the space, we also took account of the colors used in the brick so that we can really have it match and reflect that. And these paint colors are important because the materials that we've chosen are actually not brick, but they're painted to look like brick. And I'll show you a picture of that. So the location, when on the right hand side of the screen, you can see where the church is with the yellow circle. Actually, that's the office building. The church is across from that. But on the left hand side is an open clearing where a lot of community events are held, like little fair events for little booths, and a couple other types of community events throughout the year. So it's a clearing, and there is electrical access right there. For visibility, we wanted to make sure that we were outside of the VDOT regulations, which is 45 feet away from the property line, so that we don't cause any issues with Richmond Highway traffic. But at the same time, the point of getting our message out is to have good visibility. So we think this clearing spot is a great spot, which, and based on the height of the text that we've chosen, has good visibility all the way into this intersection, which is Pohig Road and Richmond Highway. It's angled, it's not double-sided, it's only meant for this one-way traffic to have visibility. Again, not trying to be flashy. So here is the side view. You can see the clearing, and it was fall when we were out there, so we kind of have a mix of some of the leaves are gone and some aren't, but you can see it's a nice open clearing, no obstructions with poles, utilities, or anything else from the roadway to distract drivers as well. And then here is kind of a mock-up of it, and then I guess I just want to highlight the colors. We didn't mock up the colors, that we would use the colors that match the historic, but this is the brick structure and the monument with the colors. And the products that we chose to use, we wanted to have that sense of foreverness and longevity. And so the sign itself is made out of an HDU product, which is high density urethane. It's really similar to concrete in how long it lasts. And it's a painted product. It's very, very durable and thick, has high density. And we chose a 4 inches thick. So absolutely not going to be damaged in any sort of, if there was, heaven forbid, some vandalism or, people walking through there. So that's the main product. And if you guys aren't familiar with that product, we did one recently at another Episcopal church across town. Nice and bright colors for that one. But yeah, you can just see how that looks. And then the brick structure, so it's actually a faux brick. It's same thing. It's a sprayed plastic type product that's put into forms. So it's exactly to the right dimensions that we want. And these just don't degrade like natural brick does. And so that's why we propose that. And I have a picture on the bottom right of a similar one we did, which is also on Telegraph Road off of for the U.S. Coast Guard. So it's inside their property, not visible to the road. It's just for the base personnel to get the message out there. But as you can see from the picture, it looks like real brick. Nobody knows unless you're up there touching it. So, and again, it just holds up really well to the elements. Here's a zoomed in picture of the view of the message. Really, honestly, the traffic is only going to be able to read Pohig Church very well. The rest of the information would be for people walking or people who are stopped at a traffic light. And that's just, you know, the main point is to know about the church because it's so tucked back there. A lot of people don't know about it. And they did request that an easy interchangeable message, which the height of those letters will make it readable for the road. The Sunday worship line that you can see there with the arrow. But obviously it's a church, their message is not crazy, just letting you know kind of the changing times, especially with COVID, and making it more economical for them to change out than replacing a whole sign. And this is what the back looks like, you know, kind of simple, straightforward. So this is, again, it would be at an angle to highlight that intersection. And looking at my notes, I don't think there's, as far as who reviewed this and who requested it. So they had Reverend Rinaldi was spearheading the project, and she has some donors who are helping her with this project, and then all of her deacons and board have reviewed this and really think it will help increase traffic and visitors. And I think that's all I have.
All right, thank you very much, Marissa. I'll go around to our other members. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm with your presentation. We don't always get folks that come to us with enthusiasm, so I thank you for that at a minimum. Miss Aubrey.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Marissa. I do have a couple of questions, and the first one is this sign in addition to the sign that's already there at the church? Because a few years ago, the church came to us, the ARB, and asked for permission to put up a sign, and it's it's white and made out of wood or faux wood, and it's upright. So this is in addition, not in place of. Is that correct?
That's correct. Our first request was to increase the size of that particular sign, but from our research, that sign is actually in VDOT territory, and so outside the jurisdiction of Fairfax County. And we spoke with VDOT, and they said it actually it would be grandfathered in, and it didn't bother them, but absolutely we could not make any changes or increase the size. And then where it's located, kind of poor visibility as well with all the trees and that brick wall. It just that's really why the church thought that sign was inadequate.
Well, that's interesting. You say that you thought the visibility might be poor because of the wall, because it's actually closer to the church, and the proposal that you've just made is to put a sign really way further down the road. I mean, so it would only be visible, and the way it says it's only on one side, it has to be what it's facing, so that the northbound traffic going north will be the people that the cars that will see this sign that you're proposing. Is that correct?
Where it is the east-west, so it'd be the eastbound traffic in this location. Yes, and yes. So the short version is all of the corners, but closer to the church, are owned by VDOT, so we cannot put any signage over there, which was our number one preference, but this is our number two, and it will get the job done.
Okay. It's very reminiscent of the layout with the brick part is very reminiscent of what Fort Belvoir has done further north, with all of their signage and all their various and sundry gates. I do have a couple other questions. Are you planning, you did mention what there's going to be, it will be illuminated. Is that correct? You're going to have uplight, an uplight lit monument sign, so there'll be lights in the ground shooting north, up, or what?
Yeah, identical to the ones that are on that other monument, but yeah, on the ground facing upward, and that will be handled via separate permits, so I don't have them in this slide deck, but
okay. And also the photo that was shown of the location, it really looks sad as far as lack of landscaping. Is there any plan to put any landscaping around the sign?
Oh, I'm sure it's why we wanted to raise it up high enough to make room for landscaping, but I will add that to the church notes and ask them about their landscaping.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Mr. Burns.
If you could go back to the photograph that showed the sign mocked up in location. Yeah, there you go. I agree with you. The only thing you're likely to be able to read from your car is the words Pohick and Church. Everything else, I can't even read it on my laptop. It's so small. So that made me think about other things, and that is the church has a fair street front on inbound Route 1, that is towards the city of Alexandria. And forgive me, this is irreverent, but one of the things that crossed my mind was a series of signs like the old Burma Save signs, might have accomplished what I think that their intent was that you described, is to notify people that this is coming, kind of keep an eye out for it and just kind of lead them to look for it. This just tells you it's somewhere, but you don't really get a hint that you have to go another 100 or 200 yards before you can even begin to see it. But in terms of its overall size and compatibility with the surroundings and stuff, I think it's fine. I will defer to Mr. Plumpy on how you might treat it to make it more attractive within its setting. But overall, I don't have any significant problems with it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Burns. Ms. Swan.
I think you must mention in the presentation, but I just want to make sure. So the brick color is to match the church brick color.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and I have the paint codes here listed on this slide, but
I see. And my second question is, from the drawing, I did not see the height of the text. Like the biggest one, the Pohit Church, I think they are about a foot tall. Is that?
it's actually 8 inches.
Okay.
The church is 8 inches high.
Okay. Okay. And the rest of the information, those text is changeable.
Yeah, the middle 3 lines are interchangeable. So for example, when they change reverends, it's easy to swap out that information.
I see. Yeah, I think the sign is big and visible, and I don't have further comments.
All right, thank you, Samantha. And go on to Mr. Kalinsky.
Thank you. I think the sign and the podium, or the base that it's attached to is going to be very effective. It's made for 2 speeds, highway speed and when you're stuck at the light speed, where you could stop and look and get a little more attention. I think it's very effective that way. It'll pique the curiosity of the people who are curious and be able to convey the information and let people know it's there. So, or at least in the area. My only a couple comments. Just curious to see this fake brick product. How that actually turns out, looks and feels in real life. And I think the Ms. Aubrey's comments earlier, some sort of foundation planning around it will go a long way to really soften it as it in its placement in that kind of more barren landscape. So So I think it's in the right track. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kalinsky. Ms. Murray.
I think that it's a very elegant and attractive sign. As a sort of traditionalist, I have some concerns about the man-made materials, but I would let the design professionals ask those and express those opinions.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Murray. I think that's all you broke off there for the last second. So I
I'm
think.
sorry, yes, that's all I had to say.
All right. Ms. Orr.
The colors seem a little brighter than the picture of the church was. Hopefully, yeah, that's a much more subtle brick tone to me than this. And maybe it's just, graphics on the computer, but I'm hoping that it's not too bright, too shiny. So anyway, other than that, we're fine.
Yeah, it's a natural painting process that they use. So it's very natural and organic looking. And I was afraid to falsely represent what that would look like. So I thought, well, I'll go with definitely not these colors. But I think it's maybe important to try to simulate that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Orr. Mr. Plumpy.
Yeah, sure. Hi. Very nice presentation, and I like everyone else. I'm more of a purist. I'd rather see real brick, but perhaps cost and so forth is the linchpin here on that. You said that this lasts longer than real brick. I'd like to contest that a little bit because I think that building is probably close a couple, 200-300 years old. So I'd like to see if the sign will last that much too. Who knows? But in any event, I think as long as the colors are subtle and everything, I'm like Mr. Klinsky said, love to see it. Maybe when you come back for your approval, or if you have another workshop, whatever, is to actually bring a real sample, even though we still maybe virtually doing the meeting. But I think it's still be good to see what it looks like, because I'm a skeptic. I'm not really one for faux materials, but this is that distance, which should be fine. The back of the sign, is that visible from people traveling on the roadway from the other direction? The back of the sign, so it's.
No.
Okay, no, it's not. Okay, that's fine. I couldn't tell if it was or not. Okay, no, okay. Oh, yeah, I see it. Yeah, there's woods behind it, but I agree. Yes, there needs to be landscape and so forth. But indigenous native plant material, don't let it stick out like a sore thumb with the landscape. You're not trying to hide your sign and post the compliment into the landscape the best you can. And the lighting, I'm curious to see what kind of lighting it will be. So if you could present a drawing that shows a night view of the drawing, if you can graphically show that would be great. And the type of light fixture and where they would be placed in plain view. Assumption is it's probably going to be an LED light of some sort, but make sure that it's one that will complement your colors, not wash out or destroy your colors of your brick. So there's different temperatures of light that will help you out instead of hurt you. So overall, I'm fine. And there is no requirement that this needs to be a breakaway sign, because is it far enough away from the highway? Breakaway meaning that if a car hits it, has to explode off its footing. Shake your head, yes, no, or...
Yeah, correct. It's not required. It's far enough away.
Okay, good, perfecto. And that's all I have to say. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Plumpy. Mr. Zellman.
Pretty much agree with Mr. Plumpy's comments, and think having some actual materials to look at, even if we are virtual, would be helpful, but seems okay to me. Thank you.
All right. So I would have to agree with Mr. Plumpy and Ms. Murray. I'm a bit of a purist regarding materials. I would prefer brick. I do wonder if we're trying to take some cues from the church itself, if it should have some kind of pedestal it's on, since it does kind of play off the same materials on the church itself. I think that could be getting too close, though, to trying to create a false historicism, though, so I'm not necessarily tied to that. But I feel like Joe stole my thunder with the fact of HDU, I think, has a warranty life of about 15 years is what the usual manufacturer warranty. And I think he's right. The brick on the church definitely has shown the test of time and its duration there. I'm not against using another material like that. I agree some kind of sensitive lighting is appropriate. I haven't been on this portion of the road during the key rush hour anymore, so I do realize that if you're in traffic, you might actually get to spend a lot of time reflecting on the sign. At least back when I used to work over at Belvoir, that was something that occurred a lot. I would say, I think in particular, when you come back to us, some more info on the materials. So you said that you're going to be coming back for, are you doing a separate submission for lighting? Is there a reason it's not being done at the same time?
I don't have an electrical license, so I don't usually do that. I have someone else, but it makes sense for us to coordinate and do it together.
I'm just curious, because usually when we see a lot of these signs, one of the things that we're very interested about is how it's going to be illuminated. I do appreciate that you fully tossed away the LED idea. This board has wrangled with that a lot, and I just don't, particularly with this church, it does not make sense to be an LED sign. Based on the comments you got, unless there are any other member comments, just again, like the other applicant, be sure to come back with any takeaways with your presentation for the answers to some of our questions. And I'll ask one more time, since it's a workshop, any other members have any other comments or questions or observations to provide?
One more thing, if I could.
Absolutely.
Have you considered a sign, a line that says "turn right next light" or something like that? So if it gets someone's interest, how do they get to it?
Well, there's no other turns they could do. Everything else is blocked. So it's one of those, you're lucky that it's nature guides you.
Okay, so it's intuitive. Thank you.
You mean the Lord guides you, right? All right. So yes, it sounds like you've got a lot of input from us here. We'll look forward to your future presentation and submission for consideration. Again, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you again.
Appreciate it.
All right. That ends our items for a workshop session, and that brings us on to our items for presentation. I believe I emailed everyone to give some clarification as to why this item that has an application number is located down in the presentation areas. Just for a short summary, and I think Laura's going to talk about it, but after discussing with Denise, I did not feel it was appropriate to be in our action item list given the circumstances. So I'll give a short, brief intro, and then Laura, I'll let you and Denise take it away. So this is what was submitted under ARB 14 CTV 03. It's a presentation of modifications to the site plan and change of use for a previously approved new construction of an office building located at 14001 Braddock Road in the Centerville Historic Overlay District. The site plan and building permit were issued for the property owner with an expired ARB approval. In addition, the approved site plan was revised to accommodate a change in use from the ARB approved office building to a child care center. Jimmy Jackson with Kingstone LLC represents the project, and I think Mr. Jackson is also going to be able to talk to us a little bit, but Laura, I think you were going to give some context, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Mr. Daniel.
Thank you.
Before we give the applicant the floor, I wanted to provide some context to this application, as it is very long and complicated. So I just wanted to give a brief background. You received a memo with the materials that Mr. Jackson submitted from staff. So hopefully that gave you a little bit. I'm going to go briefly through the timeline of this project and the throughout its lifespan in the county. And then I do have some kind of key slides that just kind of represent for discussion items. I'm not going to go through everyone, but just want to kind of go through it for background and context. So, okay, so here's the property information. It's located at 14001 Braddock Road in the Centerville Historic Overlay District. It's the lot 8 with that green arrow on it. It's in the top northwest corner of the Centerville Historic Overlay District. It's currently zoned C2, and it is north of the Old Stone Church and the Havener House. Q is the Old Stone Church, and the Havener House is the star that's K across the street there. So I'm jump right into the history, as that's kind of the bulk and will be a lot of the conversation of this application. So in 1981, this property was rezoned to C2 from an R district. And one of the proffers that was included with that is a height limitation of 35 feet, because I think partially because it was in the historic overlay district. In March and June 2008, this proposal for a two-story office building and related site plan came to the ARB. They approved two applications, ARB 08, CTV 03, and 04. In 2010, March 2010, the ARB approved one-year extension to both 2008 approvals, which then expired in 2011. And lastly, they came to the ARB in June 12th, 2014 for submission of a new two-story office building because the previous ARB approvals expired. The ARB did approve that application in 2014 as well. So in December 2014, the first site plan was approved. And then in 2016, there was a revision to the site plan, which had changes in the office building into a daycare building and reduction of the parking area. But this is not routed to the Architectural Review Board in 2016. In November 19, a building permit was submitted for a new two-story commercial daycare center with a basement. In June 2021, a building permit extension was granted, and on August 9th, 2021, the building permit was issued. None of those building permit instances were forwarded to the ARB either. So we are basically at a point where we have an existing site plan and a building permit issued and approved that did not come to the ARB for revisions and reiterations. And lastly, sorry, on August 9th, 2021, the building permit was issued. In September of 2021, the property owner contacted DPD staff and asked about a change to color palette. Staff notes that there was an approved building permit and site plan at the time. The property owner decided not to change their color palette, so they went forward. We received a complaint in early February, and I should have put this on the timeline, in early February about the construction from a community member of this two-story office building going up. We did the research that I just shared with you, and we met with the applicant in February 17th, 2022. I'm sorry, not the applicant, but the property owner regarding previous ARB approvals and zoning concerns that came out of this. And some of those concerns that came out included the height of the building, the location of the play areas for the child care center, landscaping that might be affected by the play area, and then archaeology, among a couple other things. So from that meeting in February 17th, we talked with the property owner, and he agreed to voluntarily come to the Architectural Review Board, at least submit items for consideration. There will be no approval or motion or action on this because there's already an approved site plan, as Mr. Daniel mentioned, and an approved building permit. So really this presentation is for discussion only. And I'm not sure if the applicant actually has a presentation, but I do have some of the site plans that I wanted to go through really quickly just to give you kind of a timeline of what happened. So this is the initial proposal in 2008 for a two-story office building with a cellar. It's that triangle-shaped portion. Braddock Road is to the east, but looking at the bottom of this page, the historic stone church. I don't know if I have a, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but the historic stone church is located on the left-hand side, and then the Havener House is located to the southwest. I'm sorry, southeast of the application on the bottom left corner. This is what the architecture that was approved in 2008 with Linda's lovely handwriting in the corner there. And then the landscape and site came in a couple months later, approved some lighting materials. They revised a little bit of the architecture on the front of the building, and then also showed some additional landscaping on the southern property line there on the left hand of your screen and in front of the building to add as a buffer. So this is the timeline if you're following the 2014 submission. You can see there's increased landscaping and modification to a little bit of parking, I believe. No, not parking on this one, I apologize. There's additional buffering on the left-hand side of the page there. And this is the revised architecture that was approved, which changed the color palette a little bit and a little bit on the entry feature. And then this is the revised site plan that came in with the first kind of acknowledgement of the child care center and circled there. And this is not staff's edit. This is on the copy that we got. But you can see the play area is along Braddock Road, and in the back there are 2 play areas. And so some of the concerns with the play area is that it was a zoning. The zoning ordinance requires the play area to be outside of the minimum required front yard, which this application was not caught. So we worked with the property owner and he voluntarily reduced it. So I think it stands at about 10 feet encroachment into the front yard. So he moved that whole line back a little bit. And then additional landscaping, reduced parking in the play area, as I mentioned. So this is an example. This was probably about a month ago now, February 11th, I believe these were taken. And I asked the property owner if he had a couple pictures he could share of of what's currently out there. Since this picture was taken, the roof and the trusses were put on. But you can see the cellar, and the staff felt that although this did not come back to the ARB for review with later iterations, that the construction and the design of the building was in general conformance with the ARB 2014 approval. So just a couple more pictures for you. And that's all I have. And I'm happy to answer questions. Let's go back to the site plan.
All right, I will go around for anyone who might have a question for Laura. Again, just to provide some context, for background, I meet with Denise prior to every meeting to discuss what's going to be coming up on our agenda, and this was an item that Laura and Denise discussed with me. And based on my reading of our bylaws, since we are here to hear and decide applications for building permits, this has a building permit, so this is not something we should hear because our vote on it would be considered after the fact. And I have a pretty strong personal opinion that after the fact reviews are not conducive to the process that we're set out here to enforce. So that's how it got here. But obviously I kind of appreciate the fact that staff was able to put together a summary for us and that the applicant was willing to come and bring this information so that, as Laura indicated, we could at least provide discussion on it that might help inform this and perhaps find some recommendations going forward. So I look to all of y'all as well for any input. With that in mind, Michelle, any comments?
Well, I am curious whether the company that is undertaking the construction has a presentation, because it might be a little premature to ask questions of Laura. I mean, because I really would like to ask questions of the applicant. I mean, he's not really an applicant because we're not considering it as for a motion. But this project actually predates even my being on the ARB. I do remember it from 2009 and 10 and from 14 though. But I understand from Liz Crowell earlier today, I had a conversation with her, the archaeologist with the Fairfax County Park Authority. And she said this project started in like 2004 or 5, I believe it was. But I do remember in 2014 when we gave approvals to the company that is not developing this, but this company that's developing it now is supposedly developing it under the conditions of what was put down in 2014. There were conditions, And one of the conditions was to have an archaeological monitor on site when they were doing excavation work, just to ensure that there, if there was something discovered archaeologically, that it would be noted and appropriate action taken. I do know there was an archaeological survey done in 2008. A report was issued. They did some shovel testing and they did some metal detecting. And their recommendation was that, well, they've discovered the remains of a known site, and they felt it was not of significance for the National Register, because it was not an intact site. And so they felt that the development could proceed. And so that was 2008. And then in 2014 was the condition of having an archaeological monitor, just in case there was something that was discovered. And then there also was a condition that I believe it was a condition to ultimately, once the development was done, to have a wayside developed and put on site to provide information about the history of that location within the Historic Overlay District. So raising all those various and sundry questions, I'm wondering, what the current applicant has to say about all those things. Was there an archaeological monitor on site? Was anything discovered during the excavation for the building? What are their plans for a wayside describing the history of the site? I think that's.
All right, Michelle, good questions. I guess that would be a question I think we want to put, you raised the first one is, does the applicant have a presentation? So Mr. Jackson, are you here? And that would be one question I think we should get answered right away, just in case.
Mr. Jackson, can you unmute yourself? Let me know in the chat if you're having difficulties.
All right, well, it appears at this moment, Mr. Jackson might be having some technical difficulties.
We're on, oh, they're on a phone line. Okay, thank you.
All right, we might have a call-in user raising their hand, I believe.
Yes, got it. Thank you very much. Can you speak?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Jackson, we can hear you now. So I think you heard one. I guess the question is, did you have a presentation or any other materials that you wanted to present, or would you be able to address some of those questions that Ms. Aubrey brought up?
Well, I'll try to address the questions. I did have a presentation, but Laura Asenall has pretty much covered everything that I was going to refresh everyone's memory with. As far as the archaeology study, it was my understanding from Mr. Greg Budnick that he had already had a archaeology study done on the property, that there was nothing of significance that was found and no further requirements. As far as having someone to monitor, there were a number of historians that came out and archaeologists who were out with metal detectors doing the clearing of the property and doing the very early excavation of removing topsoil. No one found anything. So I don't know what was expected to be there, but it was my understanding from Mr. Budnick, who started the initial development and site plans, that he had already performed an archaeology study. Does that answer your questions? Hello?
Well, I also had the question about Mr. Butnick had agreed to, after the project was completed, to place a wayside, what we call in the historic preservation community, it's called a wayside. And there are several waysides already in different places in the Centerville Historic Overlay District that is kind of a big metal marker with on two legs that present information in an abbreviated fashion to describe to people who are walking along trails and sidewalks and all, to describe what happened at that place that they're standing at, and why is it important historically, and why do we care about it, and so he had agreed that because he felt that the history of the Centerville Historic Overlay District was something important that people needed to know about, that he had agreed to put a wayside on the property after it was developed. So is your company planning to follow through and do that?
That is correct. I was not informed as to the extent of the sign, but Mr. Budnick did mention to me that one of the proffer conditions, I guess you would call it, was that somewhere along where the creek is, apparently that was the old Warrington Turnpike there, and that there was supposed to be a landmarker or a sign indicating that there was some trail. Now, I've recently read up on it, but as to what is supposed to be written on the sign or documented on there, that I would have to work with someone to determine what that is. But I'm not opposed to paying and having a sign installed there.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you. And I would suggest you might want to talk with the people in the county heritage resources. Either they could help you develop appropriate language, or they could give you some suggestions on other individuals you might work with to develop an appropriate sign for that. That would be wonderful.
Okay, thank you. We will look into that.
All right. I think that addressed all the questions that you brought up there, Michelle. Let's go, Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have been here for all of the previous discussions on this particular property. Gives you an idea. I had brown hair then, but anyway, not that bad. And one thing I do remember from the very beginning is the problem started with the ability to build a commercial use on this site, and that's the base underlying difficulty. The ARB and the prior applicants worked together over a period of time to do all that we could think of to reduce the mass and the apparent bulk of a two-story building on a basement, above a basement in this primarily residential area. It's adjacent to a very historic church. It's adjacent to the remaining trace of a Civil War era road, and it was a challenge. Plus, there's a stormwater management issue. I find that the drawings that Laura presented is primarily in plan view, but also a little bit about the elevations, is that this applicant is building essentially what the previous approvals had approved, and so don't really have much problem with it. I'm disappointed that there's no one from the county permit issuing office here to explain the processes that led to issuing the particular permit. One question I have about process is that since the county seems to be shrugging its shoulders, well, it's permitted, gotta let it go, is the only recourse for the community members to sue the county for failure to follow their own procedures? Or is there any other recourse available?
This is Laura, Mr. Burns. I'm not sure the recourse that would be available. I do know that there was the building permit and the site plan were issued and are approved even if they did not get the A or B sign off. But the property owner is here as a courtesy tonight, but it would have to be we'll have to confirm with the county attorney's office and I can follow up, but I'm not sure what other recourse can be done, but I can follow up.
Yeah, no, I agree that the ARB in this instance is powerless, as Mr. Daniel pointed out. I just wanted to pose that question because there are probably members of the community who are listening in to the presentation. I'm also grateful to the applicant to be willing to come and explain things to us. I really appreciate you taking the time and coming explaining what you hope to complete on this site. Thank you for coming.
Well, you're very welcome.
All right, moving onward. Ms. Swan.
Mr. Chairman, my concern and the question has been spoken, so I have no further comments.
All right, Mr. Kalinsky.
All right, thank you, Mr. Daniel. I was wondering if Ms. Arsenault can put the pictures back up of the construction. I'm just more curious than anything to kind of relate the pictures to the drawings, particularly the last couple construction pieces or pictures, photographs. Okay, there and more. Okay, I'm just looking at the topography on the site, and obviously this is, say it's kind of half out of the ground. Go back, Laura, if you wouldn't mind going back to the first of those three pictures, or that one actually. Okay, that's good too. But it appears that the first floor is significantly above the grade level, and as an architect, I see issues there with accessibility. But when I look at this, I also see that they have waterproofed up to within about 16 inches or so of that first floor level. So not having visited it, it does look like it's a severe drop off from the first floor out to the street. And I'm just curious how they're going to achieve grade there without it being ridiculously steep for any sort of a cross slope on the sidewalks or ramps leading up to it.
I can speak to that. That site required a significant amount of fill. The fill, as of today, has been brought up to just probably about 6 inches above the black waterproofing line. So the site looks really good. The grade is showing a very little bit of foundation in the front along there. Now, where you see the black tar line is all been filled at this point.
Okay. Is it, I mean, and this is just the curiosity in me. I'm not critiquing it, but it seems like it would be rather steep leading down to the road. Is that the case, or is there some sort of retaining wall towards?
No, there is not. The grade along the street is raised. Also, there's a sidewalk that is supposed to go in the front there, and that is also raised. That sidewalk is moved towards the front of the building, having a ditch line between the edge of pavement and the sidewalk. So the sidewalk is up, and there's a ditch line that actually carries the water, diverts the water from the property down off the road and down to the culvert further down to the left.
Okay, that explains it to me. So the sidewalk is higher than the roadway.
Correct. Yes, sir.
I'm assuming approximately 2 or 3 feet higher than the roadway. Is that?
I have the site plan here. Let me just look at it real quick. If you can hold one for just a second. It's approximately about 18 inches higher than the roadway.
The roadway? Okay, all right. Okay, so that doesn't really affect your play area. Okay, well, thank you. I just curious about that, and I wasn't around for any of the original submissions or approvals, so I don't have too much to add to that effect. But thank you, sir, for coming out tonight.
Sure, thank you.
All right, Ms. Murray.
I remember this all too well. It was a miserable experience, and the compromise that came up with, as John put it, there was the building was definitely a compromise. But it's where it is, and there's not much you can do about it. But I'm curious, who were these historians and archaeologists that came out and examined the property when the land was being cleared? Were they professionals?
I'm sorry, are you speaking to me?
Yes.
And your question was,
were the archaeologists professionals?
They were book writers and collectors of various Civil War artifacts. I did not contact them. They came to me and explained to me who they were, what they had been doing all around Centerville. One gentleman gave me a couple of his books that he had written, and he asked my permission to survey the property with his metal detector. And he was there for 2 days for probably 5 hours each day.
Okay, I understand. I don't know how Ms. Aubrey feels about that, but I find that incredibly disturbing. Basically, you were dealing with a bunch of relic hunters.
Well, I would say, I mean, that's not the people who did the archaeological survey work. Those were people from the William and Mary, and that was done in 2008. What he's describing, I believe, he can correct me if I'm wrong, is he did not follow through with the agreement, the condition that we had placed on Mr. Budnick, which was to have professional archaeological monitors. What he did end up having was metal detectorists and collectors who don't obviously meet generally speaking, very few of them would meet the requirements of being a professional archaeologist. And on site when they were doing the excavation for the building. That's how I'm interpreting what he just said. So in other words, they didn't have any monitors during the construction. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct. And again, this goes back to even a report that Mr. Budnick had provided us with, indicated that there was no significant findings on the property to where it would require that. Maybe I read it wrong, but that was the way I determined it based on what he had also told me. And so, no, I did not have a professional monitor monitoring the site.
This is Elise again. Laura, do we have any recourse, or is it just a total lost cause?
Hi, Elise. I'm not sure. I'll have to check. I'll have to check if there's that condition was in the 2014 ARB approval. We know that the 2014 ARB approval was not submitted with the site plan, but I'll follow up on that.
Thank you. That's basically all I have to ask.
All right, thank you, Elise. Miss Orr. Hey, are you there?
I'm just absorbing it all. I was not part of this initial. I don't feel like I have very much information, you know, for historic information, but it's upsetting that these things can slide by. And anyway, I have nothing to add.
And that's all right. Thank you, Kay. If we were in a more normal environment, I'd obviously be looking around the room for members with questions. But since we've got our one method that seems to have pulled us through, I fall back on it. I appreciate your observations, though. Mr. Plumpy.
Really nothing else to add. I concur with everybody else. It's a little disturbing. This was a tough project to approve and so forth, because it's a site that maybe should not have been developed because it's, number one, difficult to construct, and number two, you know, I think there's probably other sites that this building could have been built on. So no comment. So thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Plumpy. Mr. Zellman.
Yeah, I guess two comments. I echo Kay. This is before my time, but one, I would agree with the chairman's decision on this not being an action item and not setting a precedent for taking after action approvals. The second thing I would point out, and I'm struggling to recall a specific example at this point in time, but I don't think this is the first time since I've joined this board where there's been a project that maybe we had approved in the past or approved something, a part of something in the past, and then we fast forward into the future and something has happened that we don't know about or that wasn't approved. And I don't know what we can do to improve our process to better track things over time to ensure that either we stay involved if we need to stay involved, or that what we approved is what actually ends up being constructed. But I do think that is something that might warrant discussion by this board at some future point. Those were my 2 points.
Thank you, Mr. Zellman. I would agree. So I was not here for the initial history of this project. I think I caught the tail end of it on a resubmission, if I remember correctly. I appreciate Laura and Denise bringing it to our attention, and I do appreciate the project proponent coming to us and obviously being able to answer questions. I think this is a frustrating situation, to say the least, and the fact that it seems as though, at least I felt, that the ARB was being asked to in some way try to solve a problem that was not a problem of our creating. We had reviewed several times and provided input to this application. It had had its guidance and it had been shared, and through a series of errors that I think I agree with Mr. Zellman, I'd like to understand how it got there. The project proponent was able to move forward with his application without us providing our input to him, thus creating this awkward situation. So that's one I think is principally one of my greatest frustrations. I also agree that I would like to know, it's also frustrating to find that the condition that we placed regarding archaeological monitoring was not followed through on, but that it seems like part of that is something that was lost in communication through this unfortunate handling of the building permit process. So I brought up to Laura and Denise, I think, and this is obviously not a question for the project proponent, but more for them and for DPD, is that Jason went out. What do we do in these situations? Because it would seem that this is more a question to the county attorney and to the building permit office about if a permit's approved without going through the proper steps. I mean, if there's no recourse, and part of what I understand here is that part of this is time that played against us too. But that, you know, I don't think it makes sense to have this situation happen again. But I do think the county needs to inform the citizens that brought up the concern as to what their recourses are. That that this board should not be the one that tries to provide that kind of result after the fact. That just that kind of then every application should just start building things and then come back and say, "Oops, didn't come here and we'll come do a presentation." Again, I do want to give Mr. Jackson his full due respect with that I appreciate you coming to us and presenting on this. I agree that there's not much we can do here in this situation. I would encourage that the things that are committed to, that you are able to follow through on, particularly the wayside finding. I think that is something that I would urge you to work with the heritage staff to find a way to follow through on, so that there is that interpretation here, because I do think a lot of folks appreciate the history in the Centerville HOD, and the more we can continue to draw attention to that, perhaps that'll help us avoid this situation in the future. Any other members have any other comments they might want to provide, or any other questions that we've gone for everyone else?
Mr. Daniel, this is Sean Porter. I'm the architect.
Yes,
Architect
Mr.
of
Porter.
record. The only points that I would like to point out is that the building in its facade and in its ARB design is going to remain as it was submitted and approved back in 2008. The height of the building, which was in question, as Mr. Jackson brought up, will be brought to grade so that it is in conformity with the approved elevations. We had discussion, I thought, that would be on today's topic about the playground location up front and the landscaping. That hasn't come up yet, so I'm not sure when we address that, but there is a playground comment or by the city that we have to address so that we can get it approved. Outside of that, I just want to reiterate that Mr. Jackson is doing everything within the parameters of the ARB as far as what was previously approved, withstanding the use of the building. We are trying to keep every ARB integrity intact, as far as elevation, building height, circulation, landscaping. So I just wanted to point out that even though right now under construction, it does seem a little larger in life than it will be. And I think that's what brought the issue to light, is that once everything is graded out and once everything is completed, it will be more reminiscent of what we submitted for ARB and ARB's approval.
So I appreciate that context on it. So I'll take your first one, and then I'll ask Laura for the question on the playground equipment and other site improvements. But with regards to the fact that the project is sticking to the prior ARB approval, I think the big sticking point on that is it is a prior ARB approval, and those approvals expire. So when they do, we do expect resubmission, and part of that is because the ARB is a changing board, as I think many members of this board have highlighted, that perspectives change and interpretations change on what is appropriate. Not saying that might have changed how this project would have gone forward if it had been resubmitted, but that's why we have expirations on those. And again, I fully respect that Mr. Jackson is in a position that this is the county's mess that they need to sort out for us, because it should have been handled properly so that we could have had this discussion as an application or a work session. And maybe it would have been as simple as approving it, again, adhering to some of the conditions that were applied before. But instead, we were given a mess of processing.
Right. And we proceeded on an administrative approval with acknowledgement that we were not changing previously approved documents. So I think at that point we got our permit. But like you said, it's a muddy mess. It's more a situation with the county in that somehow we were able to pull our permit because we got administrative approval. And Laura, just correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's how we were able to proceed the way we got to where we are. administratively?
Well, technically, the building permit was approved before it even came to our office. So when you came to our office, you asked for a color palette change to the building. And we reviewed it at that time and said, if you're going to change the color palette, you need to come back to the ARB. And at that point, we probably should have checked to see if there was an expired approval. But since there was already a building permit approved and a site plan approved, we didn't verify that. So there was no admin approval from the ARB. You just basically went forward because you weren't changing the color palette on an approval that should have come back at that time. But the building permit was
Understood.
approved before it came to our office.
Right. So we didn't know what we didn't know at that time, and we progressed.
There's a lot of this that I hope will be addressed by the county's plus system. That would be part of my hope, is that that's going to help rectify some of that potentially, Laura, but maybe not. Maybe this is still a deficiency. That is something that.
Well, I wanted to give an overview, if you could humor me for a bit, about kind of the process that staff does. And Denise, please feel free to jump in about the ARB administrator's role. When the building permit got submitted 3 times, the 3 times it probably should have been routed to us and it wasn't. That when the building permit's submitted, that's when it gets triggered to our office. Also the site plan in 2016, that didn't go through a zoning review, and it didn't, so then therefore it didn't come to our office because zoning picks up the historic overlay districts, and that didn't come to our office either. So there were 4 different times potentially it should have come to our office that it didn't. And we don't necessarily have a monitoring system in place for cases moving forward. We get triggered when the building permit comes in, and then we do a conformance check. So when that building permit came in, when it should have come in and got triggered to us, we would have checked to make sure it was conformance. But since it already had an approved building permit, we kind of proceeded because we had assumed it was already approved. So
Laura, whose responsibility is that?
I'm not going to get into all the different responsibilities of who did what. I will admit that there are errors made in the county. But
Okay,
it
I just
is
want to make
building.
sure that we,
Right.
because we're the ones that ultimately have the issue of delays or stalls or stop work orders, violations, things, right? But of our undoing. I mean, it's nothing that we had done. So I'm
Well,
just going forward, other projects, lessons learned. Where do we go from here?
I'm not going to venture into that. We had a private discussion with the zoning administrator on those issues, and that's not necessarily germane to what's in front of the ARB tonight.
Understood. Thank you.
So Laura, I guess the other item that was brought up, and so I appreciate you providing a little bit more context on this, and I think that's why I didn't want it on an action item, is because it would merely be adding to the pile of administrative woe that has been created. But it was brought up about the site plan and the changes there. My understanding is that those are things that are also not triggering the need for a building permit, so that this board does not actually have something that we could review in the sense of an approval, but we could obviously provide feedback on that.
Right, and thank you, Mr. Porter, for bringing that up, is that there is a site plan in front of you, and I'm sorry I neglected to put it in the PowerPoint, but this is the most recent one we've kind of collaborated with the property owner on, taking into account the landscape area along Braddock Road and also the play areas that had come in. So the issues that came out of our discussion was height, which we have already worked with the property owner on, and he has agreed to a height certification before final approval. The play area, one of the violations was there can't be a play area and a minimum required front yard, and the applicant has reduced that. But once again, these are all requests of the applicant since he's operating off an approved site plan. But to that point, we wanted to bring that up because the exterior modifications, the play area and the landscaping would fall in a normal process would fall under A or B purview. So I'm thank you, Mr. Porter, for bringing that up. And if you have any comments or feedback on the play area, they had also given us proposed fencing and things like that in the presentation package, if anyone had comment on those.
I would turn to any of the ARB members if they had any comments on those materials that were provided to us as part of the application. I believe they were all in the submission file that Denise provided for us with the SharePoint that included some fencing materials as well as a proposed sign. Rather than going around to everyone again alphabetically, if there was a member that had any comments, again, as Laura pointed out, this is not something we are reviewing for an approval, and that the applicant has been, or the project proponent has been agreeing to some of these requests in this circumstance. So if there was any observations from any of our members, I would obviously entertain them bringing them up. I'm trying to keep a track of all the cameras, see if anyone's putting up their hand or if anyone wants to unmute.
This is Joe Plumpy. This probably affects me the most. And honest to God, I did not open up the share file yet, so I apologize for that. No need to drag this on anymore. But it doesn't really matter. It seems like any comments I give, it doesn't really matter because this is not an approval session or anything like that. It's just observation. So I'll refrain from comment. My most curiosity is what kind of play equipment it was, if it's going to be obnoxious from the roadway, that kind of stuff. So I have to reserve my comment because it really doesn't matter.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
With regards to the school in-ground sign, I think it's wholly appropriate to what we're doing. I don't think anybody would have, I would not have objected to this, had it been brought in front of us. So I think that's fine.
Sorry, if I could interject, Mr. Kalinsky, that's a good point. The applicant, the property owner has not submitted a sign permit for that yet, so he will return to the ARB with the permit for that sign at a later date.
Assuming it doesn't change, I don't think I'm going to change my opinion then.
All right, I'm looking across and I do not see any other members indicating. So I guess at this time, we don't have any other comments on the other than the feedback you've received from county staff otherwise regarding trying to rectify the situation. We look forward to a submission regarding the sign. Oh, Ms. Murray, I see your hand going up.
Before this winds up, I'm the History Commission for the visitors. I'm the History Commission's representative on this board. And the current chairman of the history, Centerville has a very intense, strong historic community, several different groups, even historical groups. Excuse me. This issue is of great concern to the current chairman. Actually came and attended many of the meetings. And I would imagine she's got an opinion as to what should be on the wayside markings. So I would recommend that staff direct the applicant toward Ms. Rapetti. Find out what the community expected for the markings.
Could you repeat the name of the person, please?
Staff will tell you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
It's Cheryl Ann Rapetti, Mr. Jackson. She's chair of the History Commission, but yes, we can coordinate that with you.
Thank you so much.
I think Ms. Murray's point is well taken there. In particular, obviously, because there's a lot of sensitivity about this, the more engagement possible would be, community-wise be better. The only other observation I might add, just to provide a full level of context for understanding on the concerns brought up about the archaeological monitoring. I understand that, the survey information indicated that it was likely that there was nothing there or nothing of significance there, more importantly. But sometimes, particularly in areas of high levels of archaeological sensitivity, there's frequently a requirement for monitoring for the off chance that that information is just not catching something, because archaeological testing is done at a set intervals, and sometimes you just lay out your grid in just the wrong way that you miss every single thing. And so when something like a large project like this goes into the ground, you're turning up everything. And so there is the possibility of actually discovering something. And so that was part of what drove on that request, if I had to guess, when it was put in initially. It's unfortunate it wasn't followed through on, but that just for some context there, that's part of why Ms. Aubrey asked the question she did and why Ms. Murray had the concern she did when finding out that the folks that were actually asking about the information were not the ones we would be anticipating. Again, I appreciate staff for giving us a summary on this, and thank you, Mr. Jackson and Mr. Porter, for providing information on our questions here.
One last thing, Mr. Daniel. I just want to make sure that the sign that we're talking about for the history of the site is not linked or hindered to him getting occupancy permit when the building is ready for occupancy. Those are two separate items, correct? Or is one connected to the other?
So there's my understanding, and I'll let Laura or Denise provide some info on it. There is the sign, I think, that's being proposed for the building, which is a totally separate item in itself.
Right. I'm not talking about the monument sign. I'm talking about the historic placard sign that we're talking about, right?
Laura, I would look to you as to how that condition was conditioned previously and where.
Right.
So my understanding is we're operating off of the 2014 ARB approval, and the conditions, there were only 3 conditions in that approval. One was the archaeology monitoring, one was a change of elevation for the entryway, and one was massing of the building. So since that is the most recent approval, that's the one I'm operating of. I'm not aware of, unless it's from the 2008 condition, that there was a wayside marker. But I didn't see that in the history of the cases. So I don't know exactly where that wayside marker requirement was. But I mean, I think it's a good idea. If Mr. Jackson agrees to it, I think it's a good idea. But I don't, since we're not approving it now and taking any action tonight, I think we'll be able to, you know what, let me just check in that further, Mr. Porter. I'll have an answer to you. I just don't have an answer tonight.
Not a problem. And it's more so that Mr. Jackson understands that he can get the project done, operate. The wayside marker can come at a later date, but isn't tied to getting certificate of appropriateness, right? With the wayside marker in place or not in
What
place.
I'll observe for this board is that we have no action to take. So there is nothing that this board has provided today that is in any way conditioning you, because there was no application to us. And as I highlighted earlier, I did not see the purpose in doing what was be called an after fact review, because it created a absolute, in my mind, even though I'm not a lawyer, legal snarl for why we would approve something that already had a permit. So that would be with the rest of DPD to work out with you. So Laura says that she'll work with staff to find out what information DPD needs to get back to Mr. Jackson regarding those permits, but that's not something this board has any authority over.
Understood. We just want to, keep everything open, make sure that we're, doing everything that makes everybody happy.
Right. Appreciate both of you coming. Laura, thank you so much for the presentation. And I think that wraps our presentation items. Which will take us into
Thank
the
you all
board
very
stuff.
much.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, we will move on to our board and staff items for the evening. You all will note that I'm still all here with you, so that means the house is very quiet and calm. Whatever miraculous effect brought that on. All right, the first item on our board and staff items agenda is the review and action on approval of previous month's minutes for February 2022. Denise, did you receive any comments on the previous minutes?
I did not.
All right, I would look to if there were any board members that had any comments or edits that need to be provided to Denise, and if not, I would look to a motion.
Mr. Daniel, assuming nobody else has any comments, I'd look to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as submitted.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Zellman. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion carries. All right, treasurer's report. Denise, where are our coffers at?
Yes. So, your February statement, you began a beginning balance on January 28th with $19,345.19. There were various budget adjustments. I'm assuming interest. We paid the clerk, and you ended a balance in February 28th of $18,795.19.
Thank you very much, Denise. Any questions from board members on the treasurer's report? All right, hearing none, we move onward to our administrative items. Training allowance. I think this is more of a reminder to folks. I was actually just talking with Denise about this, and that we do have a training allowance for board members. Denise, if you could clarify exactly how much that is.
Sure, it's $300 per person per year. And I didn't do the research to find out how often it has been used, but I can say that since I came on in September, I've had no requests for training allowances, except for Mr. Daniel in the past month, where I reminded him that there is a $300 annual per individual training allowance to be used. However, I think there is a stipulation in your bylaws that says that any expenditures must be pre-approved.
So I just wanted to obviously bring it to everyone's attention that we do have those funds available for training, and we do have a training commitment as a CLG. So if you ever do feel the need, there was a modern buildings conference that came and went. I sadly did not get to attend because I always have meetings that conflict every time I have any type of training opportunity. But wanted to remind, particularly since we have some newer faces, since I think that issue was tossed back and forth a while ago. So if you're looking for training opportunities, both virtual and I think as we start to reopen the world in person, feel free to bring them up. And as Denise pointed out, I think they have to be pre-approved is what the bylaws say, but that might be another thing we might want to think about in the future discussing.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Burns.
Just an observation. All the conferences I've attended in the last 2 years have been virtual, and I've managed to get my office to pay for them all. But I would imagine if nobody's going to conferences, nobody's asked to use their $300 allowance. So I'm not surprised at that. However, I will share with everyone that I can get my office to pay for my continuing education for my architect's license, which also then happens to cover most of the requirements for a certified local government. So if somebody wants my $300 this year, they're welcome to it.
All right, we hear it there. There might be $600 available. I just observed it because there has been a big influx in virtual conferences and virtual events, and it's becoming more and more common. So, and those have been much more affordable. So $300 goes a lot longer than it did for attending a conference in person, depending on that barely covered travel in most cases, and depending on where you were going. All right, taking us on to, unless there are any other administrative items, Denise?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right, discussion, updates, and reports. Home runs, acres, HOD.
I'm trying to say that with it, keeping Holland Hills and Homes Run Acres Historic Overlay District straight. So we're constantly struggling as staff. I think this is an update for you all. Staff will be working with the community to conduct a poll similar to the poll that we did for Holland Hills. It was important to the community to receive this feedback, so we're going to move ahead with that. The next work group meeting is scheduled for next Wednesday, March 16th at 6:30. Rezoning cases, but I will pause here if anybody has any questions.
I'm not seeing any.
The original Mount Vernon High School is anticipated to return in April for recommendation. No further rezoning cases updates. The Section 106 cases, the George Washington Memorial Parkway, I have received no comment from the Architectural Review Board. I put the files in the share file. The question for the Architectural Review Board is if you're interested in becoming a consulting party in this process. And I put a motion in the draft motions if that was something that you all are interested in. It's the George Washington Memorial Parkway North Section Rehabilitation Project.
So I would look to ARB members for discussion on this. As you all know, I have a very tricky relationship with Section 106, so I can't really make a decision on that. Michelle, I see your hand up.
After I unmute myself. I think of this particular project in the same way I did with the wolf trap. The Park Service has done a really pretty good job of doing all the environmental work. I mean, the FONSI was done, the environmental assessment was done, and they have a Section 106 programmatic agreement with the SHPO and the county and other signatories that were all completed in 2018. And where they are now is they're in the actual real design build. I mean, they're getting ready to actually do the project. So I'm not sure it's really worthwhile time-wise, effort-wise, to get involved. I am a firm believer that one needs to choose it's kind of like choosing your battles, although this is not battles, but you have to choose selectively in what you want to be involved with. And it's, in my opinion, far better to get yourself involved in projects where you anticipate some major issues that you care about. But this one seems to be on a smooth sailing path, unless John, who's with the Park Service still, can know something else. So I'm not sure that it's necessary for the ARB to be involved in at this point.
Fair point, Michelle. Any other members have any observations or thoughts on our participation? Just remember, if we do decide, we have to inform the Board of Supervisors, particularly the specific supervisor, and go for our process of letting them know that we're going to request to be a consulting party.
Mr. Chairman, I would second what Michelle said. The Park Service has done their homework. My only concern has really nothing to do with the types of things that we might be able to review, but that these upgrades that they're proposing to make, I think will allow people to go even faster. And so I think control of speed, which is, from my own experience, because I live in the southern end of the George Washington Memorial Parkway, is that the primary worry is speed. This will only enhance the ability to speed, and so that's my only concern. I also agree with Michelle, we need to pick our battles. And since we're talking about Section 106 issues, I'm wondering, sorry, Laura, I'm going to ask again, do we have any feedback from the county's involvement as the consulting party to the One University Plaza project?
Mr. Burns, this is Laura. I've been pretty busy with Holland Hills, so I have not followed up on that, but I will.
Fair enough.
I have it on my list. Thank you.
All right. Well, not seeing any cases for indicating participation. I think, Denise, right now the ARB is not going to pursue being a consulting party.
Thank you very much.
As a teacher of the 106 process, I would say that is a wise decision by small consulting parties such as an ARB to choose their battles. All right. Our next item on there is the Reston Master Plan, unless you had another 106 case.
No, I did not, but I also don't want to steal your thunder. Would you like to give the Reston Master Plan update?
Sure, you can go right ahead. I've talked my head off about it.
Oh, okay. As you all know, Mr. Daniel has been serving as a member of the Reston Master Task Force. Staff has been working with Mr. Daniel, although he did the heavy lifting to craft the language for the draft maps, craft the language and draft maps to include in the Reston Master Plan, and to incorporate the Reston Architectural Survey, the information from the Reston Architectural Survey into the updated master plan. The Reston Study Task Force interim recommendations are now available on the Reston Study webpage. To see their recommendation edits and changes to the comp plan, navigate to the Reston Task Force interim recommendations tab, which if you just Google Reston Area Study, you'll come to the plan amendment and you'll get to that text. So over the next few weeks, the Reston Study Task Force will be presenting the recommendations to the various community groups throughout Reston, and these meetings are also listed at the same website along with the task force presentation. More extensive community engagement is planned for this summer, and Mr. Daniel has requested that the task force present to the ARB at that time. And then the public hearings are anticipated to be scheduled for the fall of 2022.
So on piggybacking on top of that, I would encourage you all who have an interest to take a look at the interim recommendations. So I principally provided the text for the heritage section update, but I also provided suggestions for various other sections, as well as as a Restonian, I provided a few sections that are immaterial, I think, to really heritage, but I took my chance to throw in a few other things, particularly related to community health and equity, which are things that are near and dear to me, not related to historic buildings, but maybe somehow connected if you want to get into access to heritage resources. But please, if you have an interest, take a look at the areas where you think there could be improvements. I asked the supervisory staff that there be a presentation given to us later so that we could hear what they've heard, and as well as hear your feedback on the interim plan. And then obviously, as Denise pointed out, it's going to go through public commenting. It's going to go back to the task force for their input on it, and then it will go out through the actual approval process. So it's got a lot left to go, but I think if this is a example of how we could be better involved, then it's something we want to start holding up to other districts as a way to better involve ARB membership in their planning initiatives, because I definitely felt like I had a chance to get our word in a few places where previously we were just shocked as this is what the comp plan says, is what we get told a lot. I think John and Elise in particular, I know you two have heard that statement probably more times than you want to count, but that's what the comp plan says. So that's what we're doing here. So.
Okay, thank you. Also, following along on that, there was just for your general awareness, there is a proposal under review 2232, which reviews public facilities, to create a park on the top of the landfill at Lorton. Staff consulted with Mr. Daniel to determine, and we determined not to request a presentation at this time. Moving on, I have no correspondence. Moving on again, no, old business. I have left the courthouse arcade repairs on the agenda just in case there was any updates. So I'll pause there and see if there's any update.
Any updates, Jason?
Not that I'm aware of. You know, I think, you know, we talked about the chairman's of the board's letter last time, and that's where I understand things stand. I had some communications with Heather Bollinger, who said Clerk Fry had reached out to Chairman McKay, but that was not anything that was in writing. Apparently, that was a phone call, and I have not heard anything since then.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Bylaws update.
Bylaws update. Yep. So the memo to the board outlining the revisions to the ARB and History Commission's bylaws was distributed in early February. This memo was prepared for the board prior to the BOS hearing for approval of the bylaws revisions to allow an opportunity for board members to get more information and clarification, specifically around the 106 process, if that was needed. The anticipated board date for approval, or at least to bring the bylaws for approval, is now May 10th, 2022.
So we may have new bylaws by then. Long time coming. All right. Any other old business?
Not that I have. I don't know if anybody else.
I'm always looking at John. John
Yeah.
sometimes always has old
I
and
have-
or new business.
This is Laura. I have a quick announcement. Actually, we're trying to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to put that under new business, Laura. But
Oh, go ahead. That's fine. No, that's fine.
Feel free. I was just, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. We're trying to hire a limited term position to replace Kira Davis, who left us in the fall, and we've put out an ad and have got very, very limited responses. So if you know of anybody that's interested, please have them send their resume to me or Denise, and we will reach out to them. But it's a limited term, non-merit position. I think it's 15. There's a limited number of hours per year, but we can work through that if there comes up. But just please spread the word if there's any interest in a limited term position.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. 2022-2023 CLG cost share grant cycle request for ARP support for mid-century modern architectural survey. So Denise, can you give us an update on this?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you, Laura, for jumping in on the new business. I was going to ask you to talk about that because I had not know it's out there, but so I'm just going to go ahead and read the letter that I sent, that I dropped in the share file. If you all will indulge me, I think it's easier to do this. So the VDHR's CLG and cost share grant cycle began the beginning of February for the 2022-2023 cycle. With the loss of yet another important modern architectural resource, the Geller House in New York, and the increased development pressures that Fairfax County has continued to face, staff has been considering a countywide survey of modern architectural resources. Out of all the options to consider for survey, I believe that the modern architectural survey rises to the top in priority and would be the easiest to scope a draft to submit to DHR's grant programs this cycle. Chris Barberchak of the Virginia Room and I met not last week now, probably 2 weeks ago, to begin discussing and drafting the scope for the survey. We started with the buildings located in Fairfax County identified on a DHR, notable modern architecture in Virginia, circa 1940 to 1990. Chris then added the rest of the buildings you'll find on the list that I enclosed, using two resources, the Virginia Record, which he has indexed, and a book called The Virginia Architecture 1791 to 1957, And of course, he specifically targeted Fairfax County, things the Fair Fund in Fairfax County. I'm certain that we will only be able to accomplish a successful grant application with assistance. And I'm wondering if you all would review the attached spreadsheet that was in the share file. Specifically for emissions and for priorities, probably a little less for priorities because I've since had a conversation with the state, and they helped me think about the scope and refining the scope as far as their priorities. They're very excited about this and very encouraging about the opportunity. So, but I'm really concerned that we may have missed something obvious. And you all know the county as well as I do, and even better. So if you could just take a look at that spreadsheet and see if you think that there is something that we are overlooking, and get that feedback to me as soon as possible, I would appreciate it. In addition, I think we're probably going to have to prioritize and well, yeah, we'll take that as we get it, as we come. And if you have any questions about the priorities, I'm happy to discuss them with you. So at the last meeting, John Burns mentioned that the Virginia chapter of the AIA sent, and I believe this is correct, a letter to the Board of Supervisors offering to help identify modern resources in Fairfax County. I've reached out to John in an email specifically to try to put me in touch with the Virginia chapter of the AIA, asking for assistance to write a brief context for the grant submission, and of course reviewing the preliminary scope as I have provided it. I'm keenly interested in hearing from him and the chapter, the Virginia AIA chapter, because there's just no way with the workload that I have right now that I can write that context. So I'm asking for help doing that. Also, the Architectural Review Board has been extremely generous in their support of efforts for survey in the past years. Last year, the ARB pledged $5,000 for funding the African American Architectural Survey, as well as submitting letters of support for the Reston Survey, the African American Survey, the Gum Springs Survey, and the National Register nomination of the Pride of Fairfax, the former Oddfellows Hall in Gum Springs. The History Commission, during their March meeting, pledged $7,500 to this survey for a matching grant application. There are approximately 21 districts and 238 individual resources preliminarily identified. Based on last year's cost estimates and including every identified district and individual resource, the approximate total cost for the survey as preliminary scoped will be approximately $62,000. Admittedly ambitious, I'm requesting that the Architectural Review Board consider pledging $7,500 in support of the Mid-Century Modern Survey, matching the History Commission's contribution of $7,500. With that level of support, the county's portion of the cost share match would be approximately $3,100. The county's portion of the cost share match would be approximately $31,000. And that would be halfway met with the $7,500 and $7,500. So that would leave staff requesting from DPD $15,000. And I can say as an update, we've already made that request and been approved for the $15,000 from DPD. So the other thing that I included was the outlines of the two grant matching fund schemes, if you will, and then that both grants are due on April 1st. The cost share grant is probably not the one that we will submit for it, but it probably will not be the one that we will be funded through. It will probably be the 50-50 match, excuse me, the cost share grant will be the one that will probably be funded through, not the CLG grant. So, and I apologize for the last minute nature of this request. The timing of these grants, I think I received the proposal on, I think maybe the 1st or 2nd of February, and then I have to get it back by the 1st of April. So the timing is not great. But we did broach the subject at the last Architectural Review Board meeting with potential different resources that we could be surveying in this next grant cycle. And thank you very much for your consideration.
So in summary, I think Denise is looking for help from us looking at that list, but also looking for some type of motion or recommendation from us indicating that we would support providing some level of cost matching like we've done in the past. That would usually likely entail the chairman writing a letter indicating support as well, because these applications require letters of support. So the question is whether or not we think this is one that we want to support and dedicate our time to. Obviously one observation I'll add is that the Reston Association on their Instagram literally shared 3 pictures of their way back pictures of modern buildings in Reston, one of which was the USGS, another one was the DeCita Engineering Office, and the other one was the Reston Engineering Center for Sperry Systems that were here. And they all these pictures of very Reston architecture. And it's like, okay, so you recognize that these things are pretty and they're fun to look back on, but we don't even know if many of them still exist. And, USGS, yes, they're still around, but some of the other ones, not so much, or at least not in the forms they were originally. So, where I lie on it, but I would look for folks to give some comment on that and advice to Denise. And I think she's looking for some direction from us in a motion, because then we have to take some action if we want to seek the cost sharing that we've gotten in the past.
I will also add that since the list was distributed, we have added several new sites. One is, Chris, we will be adding all of the identified sites from the Reston survey that were not surveyed. So that was the list in the back. So all of those sites will be added. And then there were school buildings that we were provided that we've added since then.
That was true. Those were some of the ones that Jason mentioned, right?
Actually, that was to the African American
Oh, that was the
survey.
African American survey.
And
Sorry, not you, Mr. Zell, meant a
yeah.
different Jason. Okay. There was a conversation about school buildings, both in our African American heritage resources to be looked at in the county, and that also triggered a conversation about schools in the county that might also fall in this category. Any comments from the members or motions of support and indications of how much we might support?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Burns.
Conceptually, yeah, I'm all in. You guys know me. I'm a 20th century fan, and I will certainly help in whatever way that I can. I can help to be a liaison to the AIA Virginia chapter and its Historic Resources Committee. I'm a member of that committee, and would help in any way I can. In terms of the pledge of $7,500, what impact will that have on our ability to continue to pay our ongoing expenses, such as compensation for the recording secretary?
That's a good point.
That is a good question, Denise. That was something I would hope that you or Laura could give us an answer on, that we would not be dipping into those funds.
That's true. That's true. Okay, so let me get what we said for the.
And Michelle.
Just a thought or a question. I know my understanding is that the History Division or History Commission gets more money every year than the ARB. So if they are regularly getting a larger sum and they give out a certain percentage, I mean, what is our percentage? What would an equivalent dollar amount be for the same percentage of our annual budgets. I would wonder about that. Just because they give a certain amount doesn't mean we would want to give that same dollar amount all the time if their budgets are always a lot bigger than ours.
This was something I was hoping we would have an answer to, Denise, when we talked today, because that was one, obviously the county has picked up the cost to the Lake Ann supplementary study.
Mhm.
And so we know that they are willing to commit to those costs for us. So that's not something that we were going to have to put, at least portionally. And this was a question that came up last time regarding funding, and that's how we got to 5,000. But I was kind of hoping we knew those numbers so that if 7,500 was the number that you were seeking for us to push, that John's question could be easily answered in a no, we won't suddenly go broke.
I wish it
Can I
was.
interject? What
Yes, Elise.
I was not paying a lot of attention. What is the current balance of the board's account?
Yes, I'm sorry, Elise. I'm actually trying to pull that up right now because my Word document has gone totally
Denise,
crazy on me.
Denise, this is
Yes.
Denise, this is Jason. I wrote it down.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Our current balance is $18,795.19. So about $18,800.
And the fiscal year ends at the end of June.
Yes.
I
So I'm gonna.
You've got more than enough to do it. The History Commission, Michelle, does a number of other programs. For example, markers that take up a portion of our budget. So I don't think it's fair to compare the History Commission's budget, the ARB's, because we have a different purpose.
I'm like John, where I'm all in that I think we have the budget to accommodate 7,500. I would, Denise, I was kind of hoping we'd know that number so that we can tackle that concern, because but I can't make a motion, but you would see me instantly saying yes, of course, because we've gotten this cost share before, and we've also dragged the county along with us because we've kind of almost I don't want to say embarrassed them, but said, hey, look, your two boards are funding this. Can you put up money too to also support this type of survey?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Jason.
Yeah, I was a government major and I hate doing math. I'm going to try. But based on what our previous balance is, and assuming that the recording secretary was our major cost, if not our only cost from the last time we all got together and got a budget update, it would appear that that cost us about $550. And so if our new fiscal year is ending June, July, if we're doing that 4 or 5 more times, it sounds like we're going to spend somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 on the recording secretary. And so I would say that we have sufficient funds to make that outlay. So I will make a motion that the ARB match the History Commission's funding for this project at an amount of $7,500.
Is there a second to that?
I will second the motion.
May I ask for a friendly amendment that we convey our support to this cost share program? We direct the chairman to convey such support along with it.
Good with me.
I see it agreed to by the seconder.
Yes.
All right, not that I'd like to give myself more work. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. There you go, Denise. We've
Thank you.
given your indication. I will work with you on a response, and it sounds like John, as much as possible in his capacity, will try to lend some support. I would encourage everyone to take a look at that list and see if there's misses in there or things that we should perhaps not think to prioritize and other places we should. I know we're getting late in the hour. I want to throw one more thing out here on the new business, just because obviously many of you have been noticing, we've been getting notices from the county about facilities opening back up, about allowing people to come back in. I have a wife who's a school teacher who's also been getting a lot from her school system. I raised the question to Denise regarding where we're at regarding the change in this, because I've read that statement way too much, that if the county is changing its position on the pandemic, it may likely mean that we are going back into the government center to start doing meetings again. The big point that I conveyed to her was that I wanted to make sure that wasn't a knee-jerk response on anybody, so that when that happens, we have a plan, as well as the fact that while we indicated we were supportive of virtual attendance of members at meetings through our motion made previously, that can only happen if the facilities we're at actually allow that too. So that's all well and good that we're on board for some of us being virtually attending, but if we don't have the capabilities to support that, then it doesn't matter. But I made all that clear to Denise. Denise, I don't know if you have any more updates on that, but I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention that that is coming soon. I can fairly certainly anticipate.
I do not have any more updates on that specifically, Chris, but I can tell you that our building will be opening to the public next week from 8 to 4, and we'll be receiving, receiving the public on all floors. So yeah, things are changing and things are opening up, but as soon as I hear something, you will be the first person that I notify.
Right, and Laura, not to put you on the spot, but since you are higher in the pecking order and you're still on the call, any updates from your position? Have you heard anything?
I'm laughing because I literally find out maybe like 4 hours before Denise does that we're doing this implementation. But I have not heard anything about the key for us is, Denise, and I think we've all talked about a little bit, is the state of emergency. And since we're kind of easing off that, I think this conversation will come up every 2 weeks as it did for a little while there. But we will let you know as soon as we have it, because I know people are a little antsy to get
Well,
back.
I'm thinking about making it clear to us that we have to change some routines in our life, because it's very easy to wander downstairs and go sign on to a computer. It's very different for many of y'all to drive to the government center. And I can fully respect that that's a commute that you've blessedly not had to deal with for a little while, but I just wanted to make everyone aware that I'm seeing that on the horizon also as a federal employee. So I'm making sure Denise and Laura and the staff know that we want to make sure they're keeping us as informed as possible for when those changes are coming.
We are, Chris, just one extra point. Sorry, I know it's late. We are waiting for more guidance from the county attorney's office on FOIA requirement, FOIA and all that stuff with the legal requirements for public meetings for the BACs, and we haven't heard anything from that front for a while. So I'm assuming once we get more guidance, we will immediately send it to you.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Burns.
There's more involved than just simply the logistics of physically returning to the Taj for our meetings. And we had talked about, since we now get these things primarily in digital form, are we going to have large, high-resolution monitors available in these rooms? Are we expected to bring our laptops? Are we going to go back to receiving hard copies so we can have them in front of us in the meetings? I mean, we're used to now for 2 years looking at this stuff on a computer in front of us, but in those rooms, the ability to project images, the ability to share information in a digital format is miserable. And so please keep reminding them that we need the equipment to be able to do a return to in-person meetings.
Yes. And John, that's something I have made clear to Denise as one of the factors of it, was that right now that is also going to create an issue for applicants too. If suddenly we are now shifting back to hard copy versions, that we need to make sure folks know that in advance so that they have time to prepare for that. So I wanted to make sure we don't have a knee-jerk suddenly, hey, we're going back to the office in April or back to the meeting room in April, because applicants might not be, oh, I had just submitted digitally. So yes, I agree. That is a whole other item that we need to make sure is we are prepared to address, because I don't want that first meeting to be a disaster, though it might very well be still.
Noted. We will try hard not to make it a disaster.
I don't know if you can make it not. It's just going to be, we're growing pains of going back to the Taj Mahal, as John has described it. All right, unless there are any other comments from any other members, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? No abstentions? Meeting adjourned. See you all next month.
Yep. See you next month. Have a good St. Patty's Day.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Peace.
Stop recording. There we go.